Hello and welcome, connoisseurs of fine common cardboard, to today's live stream where, again, back to back, if you haven't seen the video that Clay uploaded earlier today, Clay and I are getting together one more time here in the string of many, I'm sure, to talk about cEDH Competitive Pauper Commander and talk a little bit about the recent Sanctuary Open 4 tournament that was hosted over in the Sanctuary Discord, and in which I took TPI and placed first there. Clay was on Sir Conrad. But before we get into it too much here, thanks everybody for joining us today. Clay, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing
Excellent.
well.
Yeah,
This is my second time talking to you at Link this week, so not doing too bad.
not bad at all. Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on once again. For those of you who've maybe been not watching the content a whole long time, Clay was the originator of the Tryhard server, which eventually evolved into the Connoisseurs server. So he has now taken up the reins on pursuing the cpdh.guide, which is a great website for you to learn about all things cPDH here. Let's go back to the homepage here, and you can take a look. This has all sorts of stuff about commander data, metadata, resources about how to set up OBS, and all this other stuff. Rules takes you to the PDH homebase. It's a great place to get a bunch of information. But and there's a channel as well, cPDH Guide on YouTube, which you should go and check that out. Follow that for more information from him. But today we don't really have too much of an itinerary. We're here to talk with you a little bit, answer any questions. We're going to be talking about the Sanctuary series, about our experiences with it. We're going to talk about our individual decks, some of the decks we went up against, some of our experiences in the actual games. And we're going to just run through the whole thing and give the whole rundown. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about some interesting or cool decks that we thought we saw during the tournament, as well as any sort of future pivots we're going to be making on our current lists. So for first things first, the top four here was myself on mid-range third path Iconoclast. So for all you mid-range enjoyers out there, looks like mid-range back on the menu, boys. It is an exciting time to be playing an interactive deck. Third path Iconoclast, of course, is also nicknamed as TPI, is a 2-mana Izzet commander that's going to basically print creatures every time you cast spells. That's a good way to look at it. And
Yep.
your general win condition is deploying these pingers, whether they be rewarding you for instants and sorceries, for non-creature spells, for creatures entering the battlefield, or for artifacts entering the battlefield, or in the case of our newly printed Sunshot Militia, just by tapping your creatures to do damage. And this sort of symmetrical damage, or what they call pinging, is what people are kind of calling it these days, is really, really effective at closing out games for a wide variety of different archetypes. Whether you are playing combo and you want to be doing something where you're changing the creature type on this to a pirate or something like that. Let's see, actually, we're getting a quick notification here. Make sure the... Okay, cool. Just checking. Okay, sweet. I thought somebody might be sending me saying audio's broken. Oh no! But yeah,
Oh no!
whether you're comboing with these creatures, you can combo with them with Flicker combo, with Knack combo, Knack Helix combo, which Clay you're a fan of. You can also combo with there's actually some pretty interesting like Snap Archaeomancer type stuff. There's a Ghostly Flicker combo.
One thing that I find kind of interesting, and I didn't think about this until today, is that your version of TPI, the pinger plan has always been a really good, solid like plan B for some decks.
Yeah.
Your version of TPI is the only like the deck that I can think of offhand that actually puts the pinger package like
Front and center.
front and center. So. Yeah. That's something unique about this particular list is that forward-facing pinger action. So
that's really well said. And actually I put it here in the description here that TPI has unfettered access to the best red pingers in the format, and for this reason we've chosen to lean into this for the win condition. And basically, like, this is actually something I've been doing with a lot of different decks. I think even like Gut Agent of the Iron Throne is another example of a deck that leans into the pingers, right? Or Dalek Squadron. So I've been really diving deep into the pingers because I see this as when we have something like a Hissing Iguanar, right, where it's a 3-mana 3/1 every time something dies, or a Falconwrath Noble where it pings one person when something happens. It's kind of like a third of the damage, right? It's really only 1 damage, and depends on how you count it, 1 damage for a single player, or 3 damage for 3 players, right? So
Hmm.
basically, either way, it's like approximately 1%, right? Um, or actually, it's
Yep.
a little bit more than that. It's three. It's almost 4%. Every time you cast a spell with a pinger, you're dealing about 4% of the table's life total with each ping. And so these pingers are really, really great because you can be focusing on one player, you can be interacting very heavily with one player, while also the price of admission is that
Mm.
everything we do hurts everybody else too. And it's a bit of a boiling frog thing because you're not going to end the game on the spot in most cases. The fastest win I've had with TPI was in the presence of another pinger deck, and it was during the tournament. It was turn 6. Um,
Mm.
and
And that's the that's kind of like one of the focal points of this particular strategy, as Ryan had said in the interview, which should be linked in this live stream that we did the other day. This is planning to leverage some of the other battle plans of the decks in the pod, and then he's got that closing power with
yeah,
the to the face type spells.
yeah,
So, like, as far as that particular game plan blueprint in the meta right now, TPI is like really the only one occupying that particular space, doing that particular game plan.
yeah.
So,
It's really unique, and I think that it's kind of interesting because I think a lot of there's been a lot of discussion about what is competitively viable and whether mid range is there. And I think this is a great indication of that there is a there. That
mhm.
we do have something to work with, and that if you're
If I may,
yeah,
if I may, so to the people that talk about competitive viability as they're doing this litmus test of like looking at this card and they're going, okay, X plus B equals whatever, and they're trying to figure out this metric. And then you have these other parts of the same crowd that talk about like, oh, well, it's performance, right?
yeah.
So Ryan's version of TPI has won a tournament. Another person's version of TPI, which I can't recall his name right off the bat, won a
It was
tournament in
Mighty
Philly.
Ramses.
Yep. And then my version of TPI, actually, that wasn't my version of TPI. That was your version of TPI again, had a top 4 in Sanctuary 1.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
And honestly, like this win for me wasn't so much something. It wasn't something that I expected because obviously you have to go to a tournament, choose the right deck, play well, and you also have to get lucky, right? Any tournament placement is going to require some amount of luck that your opponents didn't top deck the right thing at certain point, that maybe they misplayed, that maybe our
mm,
misplays didn't affect us as negatively as they could have, right? Because it's hard to play well for 6 hours, right? And you got to expect that mistakes are going to happen. So with all those included, I was pretty confident that at some point I would probably win with TPI. But prior to that, a lot of top fours, a lot of top fours. There was a top 6, like so. I had indicators that I was onto something with it.
oh, yeah, RIW, top
Yep,
6.
RIW, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's really exciting. There's other decks too. If we actually take a quick look here at another deck that's doing where the pingers are very much like a leaning, a forward leaning part of the game plan, is a Dalek Squadron, which has some really strong pingers
Oh,
in it.
so
Yeah,
to clarify, you're talking when Ryan says pinging, so the traditional pingers are relative to each instant sorcery or
right. A
non-creature
whenever
spell
trigger.
or
Right.
whenever trigger, where
And
these
there are
are
some of those in here
ETB,
actually.
LTB.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's a really good point too. So this deck actually has both. So this deck here, Dalek Squadron, basically you have a 3 mana 3/3 Menace Myriad. So every time he's attacking, you're creating tokens that are coming into play, and they're leaving play as well. So some things that work really well with that are like Mirkwood Bats. So every time, if you have a Mirkwood Bats in play with Myriad, and you go to attacks, you drain the table for a lot, right? Because they come in and they leave, right? So this is a whenever trigger. You also get stuff like the Nadir's Nightblade, which is going to say
Oh,
whenever it
that's right.
leaves the
Because
battlefield.
you sacrifice
Yep.
the tokens at the end
And
of.
if all
Yep.
players are in play, this translates to every trigger of this is 10% of the table's life total, because it's 3 life, 1 for every trigger, and we're also gaining some life off of it. But then, as you were alluding to as well, there are a lot of other pingers that are basically, and I consider these pingers because they have
Mm,
that sort of like symmetrical impact. They just
mm.
aren't really a whenever. They're kind of like they just happen when it either ETBs or when it dies. So you've got cards like Okiba, Reckoner Raid, Serrated Scorpion, Bloodseeker is another whenever one. This one's probably, arguably, one of the more busted pingers in black. I think the only thing that comes even close to this one is really, I mean, I think vampires like Mirkwood bats in the right home, like Mirkwood
Mhm.
bats in Abdel in particular is terrifying. But like Okiba Reckoner Raid is probably like as good as it gets, right? You're kind
Yeah,
of getting like 1 mana, you're dealing 6 in drain, and you're probably hitting somebody for 2 with the menace creature. So that's like 8 damage for 1 mana. And if you're thinking about
yeah.
like the philosophy of fire, which is that traditional that article written by Patrick Chapin, I want to say a long time ago about burn. I
I
think it was
think so.
Patrick Chapin. Yeah, where he said every card needs to translate 1 mana to 3 damage. Well, in this format, we can say if every card was like, if a card's 1 mana to deal 9, or 8 in this case, or maybe 10 if you hit twice, then that's really efficient. So there's other decks that do this as well. Also the extort decks too. So if you were to go and look at something like Vizkopa Guildmage, also kind of doing a pinging thing, if you will, except it's just with extort. You also
It's
have your
also
Citra Priest and Blood.
it's also playing Bloodseeker. So an interesting point about
Yeah,
Bloodseeker before we get too far away from it. Outside of the fact that it prohibits, it's somewhat of a stacks piece
it is a
for
stacks piece. Yeah,
certain types of combo decks.
yep,
More than that, it's somewhat of a telegraph. So the flicker combo deck has to get rid of this in some way
yes,
before they can instigate. So it's one of those things that if it just happens to stay on the board, which is kind of difficult at a 1/1, but if it happens to stay on the board for a while, it will potentially telegraph that coming combo turn. If not, be one of those deals like, okay, end of
yeah.
turn, flicker this or bounce
Bounce
this
that,
thing.
flicker
Yeah.
this. Absolutely. Yeah, Bloodseeker and Bloodseeker also has other roles too. Bloodseeker is so good because it is so cheap and because it is if you play this on turn 2 and then turn 2 somebody plays Gretchen or they play their untapper and then somebody else plays a creature and somebody else plays a creature, it's already dealt 3 damage, but it's doing all of that while also holding the combo at bay. And there are certain decks that cannot function with Bloodseeker in play. TPI has a very hard time with Bloodseeker being in play. Dalek, of course, also, you're making 3 creatures a turn. Those are going to hurt. But of course, we also need to talk about like Suture Priest is kind of the same thing. Anything that's like punishing people. But you can also look at this and just say, this is just damage. This is just unblockable damage that punishes people for playing the game. And these are really, really good for that reason. So yeah. But speaking of which, it does mess TPI up. If somebody's got those cards, or it becomes very quick. I have to be digging for a bolt. Basically, I have to be digging for a way to get rid of that kind of a thing. Now, we did have a question here from Nate or Quartz from the Discord, a good friend of the channel here. The deck is very heavy on interaction and low cost card velocity, but no seal of removal. Did you even consider it? Or did I ever
Great
consider
question.
it? Yeah, that's a
Great
really
question.
great question. I think Seal of Removal is an excellent card that I almost never find room for. And I could be wrong, right? I could totally be wrong. I think part of what makes Seal of Removal so exceptional is that it is just 1 to cast and then it's free to activate. The free to activate part of it is like really, really good. So I think if you're thinking about the kind of interaction you want to run in your decks these days, I think Seal of Removal is right there as just a great thing. If we look at a good
You
example would
wouldn't
be
be
like,
wrong.
no, you
You
wouldn't
wouldn't
be
be
wrong.
wrong, Clay.
No. The,
Yeah.
the difference with Aether Spellbomb is that it is an artifact. It can be sacrificed to draw a card. It's tutorable with Trinket Mage. It also is colorless. Seal of
There's all
Removal is
these
blue.
intersections.
Right.
Yeah.
So being blue means that protection from blue can stop it, whereas Aether Spellbomb, unless they have Apostle's Blessing or Razor Barrier or Heroic Intervention, if they have one of
Mhm.
those, then they can stop it because it grants protection from colorless or from artifacts. So Seal of Removal is great. The only thing is that like Seal of Removal does bounce the creature back to hand, and that does sometimes not do the trick. So let's talk about what Seal of Removal could do here. Seal of Removal can tag an Abdel with the ETB on the stack. So somebody casts Abdel, everybody passes priority, Abdel resolves, trigger on the stack. Prior to that, if Abdel is removed from play, they're not going to flicker anything and they're not going to create 1/1s. So a Seal of Removal is a one-time answer to that, which is really good for that reason. It's on board. If they have to spend a flicker to do it, that means they're having to kind of burn a card, which is really solid. In this deck, we can do better than Seal of Removal. And the reason that I think we can do better than Seal of Removal is because TPI has really privileged access to some remarkably powerful cards. So let's take a look at what those are in terms of our removal. And we're going to actually break this out into a visual grid here so we can see these more side by side. And let's take a look at what the removal looks like. One of the heuristics for TPI is that we want as much as possible for our removal to do a couple of things. We want it to go face. If it can go face, it's going to help us close out games because the pingers are only one source of direct damage, right? If we can Lightning Bolt, Galvanic Blast, when Galvanic Blast hits for 6 because you have 2 pingers in play, that's a huge amount of reach. It's like, that's a fifth of somebody's life total is gone. And so damage is important. 1 mana is important. Being able to kill Abdel is also very important. Being able to deal 4 damage is a really important breakpoint, I think. And so Lightning Bolt and Collateral
which is a change because for those of you veterans who've been around for a number of years, Tetiova was
3 damage
the
is plenty.
benchmark.
Yeah, 3 damage is plenty.
Now Abdel is the benchmark for that 4 damage. So
yeah, I think that's a really good point. And
because
so
Conrad, Crackling Drake,
Pneumatic Wall, even just like a slightly bigger creature. I mean, you should never be targeting Gretchen. Gretchen is a 0/4, but really just don't target.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. I saw it happen.
Stop it right now.
Don't make me point to the sign. Okay, do not target Gretchen with removal unless it's Oubliette. In fact, Oubliette is a fine answer to a Gretchen in that way, but that's really one of the few. So 1 mana, instant speed. Ideally, and then the other things that are kind of like on the sort of optional chart is deals damage to face, does 4 damage, right? Something like that. Or if it also draws a card. So there's a couple of them here. Collateral damage and Lightning Bolt, basically the same card, except that collateral damage has the downside of costing a creature with the upside of being protection against Echoing Truth. And you're going to see that there's a pattern of cards in the deck that do that.
You got a couple of questions building up. Oh my God,
we got all sorts of questions. Yeah, maybe we'll come back to the removal here in a second. We'll answer these.
Let's answer Quartz's question about the Pyrite Spellbomb over collateral damage.
We can wrap that up.
If I may. If I may.
Yeah.
So the reason, having talked to Ryan specifically, because what's interesting about both of us having a TPI deck is the fact that we'll talk to each other about their experiences with certain cards. And in some... because the meta does this thing in some high points of the meta, Echoing Truth is everywhere, and you want to be able to, or Decay, that's also a viable option. Collateral damage allows you to just basically blank those types of spells just by sacrificing the target. So in that regard, in Ryan's list, I feel like he's preferencing the collateral damage over the Pyrite Spellbomb because, and the flexibility of going, to face for X number of damage. Because I think Pyrite Spellbomb is 2 damage. It's a shock.
Yep, it's a 2 damage shock. You can also crack it to draw a card. It is in my considering, and I think it's a really reasonable card to play. Like, I think if somebody wanted to play Pyrite Spellbomb in this deck, I don't know that I would stop them, and there's a number of reasons for that. It's colorless. It can be cantrip to draw a card. It's only 1 mana. It can go face. It's also an artifact, which means that sometimes you get if you have Reckless Fireweaver in play, or sorry, actually no, if you have Ingenious Artillerist or you have Reckless Fireweaver and you cast one of these, you're going to get 2 pings for the price of 1. So there is like a lot of advantage to playing cards that come on artifacts. The other thing though, and this is really easy to forget, is that on-board artifacts can be used for improvise They can be used for cards like Disruption Protocol. You can be using them for all sorts of other stuff. You could like tap them in all these ways. They're really useful. So I think Pyrite Spellbomb is great, and I think Seal of Removal is also good. Seal of Removal is also built-in protection as well. So there's that as well. Another card too that I've been looking at is Stern Dismissal as well. Being able to bounce an enchantment for 1 mana at instant speed is actually potentially very useful. And the only thing is it doesn't hit our stuff as well, so it's not really doing double duty. But you know, Stern Dismissal works here, even though it doesn't deal damage, because when we're thinking about like our common players in the you know, sort of like the common things you're going to encounter, if it's like a gut token, this just vindicates it. It just gets gets it gone. If it's an Abdel, this does turn off their flicker. It time walks them for a whole turn, right? If they go Abdel, cast it,
forces them to have 2.
Forces them to have 2, right? And it can also bounce an enchantment for Gretchen. So this is actually a pretty cool card in that way too. But yeah, I think so. So if you wanted to play Seal of Removal, I think Seal of Fire probably falls a little bit short. I think Pyrite Spellbomb is where you'd want to be. But
I think it just depends on where your priorities for your synergy focus
absolutely
are.
And there's actually a couple things in here that you might note as well. Reckless Abandon is another one. This card slaps. It's not doing a lot of things that I do like. It does 4 damage, which is good. It does it at sorcery speed, and it costs us a creature at sorcery speed, which is interesting because instant speed sacks a creature or sacks an artifact, helps us turn off Echoing Truth. This doesn't do that. This is, however, probably 1 mana deal 6. So, you know, it doesn't stop anything on the stack, unfortunately. But
1 mana dead player.
Yeah, 1 mana dead player. I mean, this probably would be better than Flame Slash, I think, in this deck, because it's like removal, but it also goes face. We don't really care that it sacks a creature. So that's pretty good. So yeah, those are definitely strong cards you can be playing in here. Flame Slash, of course, too. Thunderclap, I think, is another one that you could play as well. That I think.
Oh yeah.
I think like I don't play it because
I do.
Yeah,
I do play it.
And I think this card's very good. I think that there are other cards that we can play instead of Thunderclap too, like Shatter the Source, which I do have in the deck. Shatter the Source comes with its own requirement, which is that we have to leave a certain number of creatures untapped. But that's not usually that hard. If we have 2 pingers in TPI, that's 3 of the cost. If we have 3 tokens left, it's literally free. You free cast this because you pay for the red pip with your pinger or with your TPI, with the Convoke. So this is a Shatter as well. It's kind of like Snuff Out Plus. It doesn't cost us life. It deals 6 damage, which is basically Snuff Out. And it destroys an artifact if you need it to.
A different set of conditions.
Different set of conditions, yeah. But Thunderclap also perfectly fine too. It just becomes a question of like how many slots do you have in your deck? I think that's a big part of it. So
now you can pivot over to that counter spell reduced cost.
Yeah,
I think that's a great question for you because
So here, what do we got? There was
how consistent.
Oh yeah. So Erosium says, how consistent are the 3 mana counter spells? A reduced cost by 2 or by 1? Actually, is usually what they are. Do you always get the reduction? I have maybe not gotten the reduction once. One of the things you got to pay attention to in TPI is that there's a very real cost to all of these cards that say tap an artifact or a creature to do something. Okay, and that is going to tax your mental game. And I made mistakes during the tournament that I could have lost to by not tapping the right things. Not tapping the right things with Springleaf Drum, with Moon Snare Prototype, with cards like Disruption Protocol, or or with like Metallic Rebuke. You gotta like pay attention to those things. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. I almost always find that these are 2 mana. Yeah, they're just 2 mana. One thing like Ice Out. Sometimes I've cast Ice Out for 3, but the reason I did it was because I had a gazillion mana. All I needed to do was I just wanted to get the additional body. I had the option, right? So I just paid the 3, made an additional token. I had tons of mana, and I was closing out the game in a 1v1. So I just paid the full 3.
these are definitely Ryan and I talked about this at depth a couple of days ago. These are definitely when we talk about leaning into like preferences. I'm very much anybody that's ever played against me knows that I'm very much an in your face pushing, adding pressure, just
Hmm.
like the energy is just going outwards towards my
Yeah, a
opponents.
lot of
Ryan
forward
is
pressure.
Ryan is very much let's hang back in the cut and let's like observe the table.
Yeah,
Let's get in like where we can. So like just that difference in
yeah.
energy, these I don't find the cost reducing items as profitable because I'm leaning myself out by pushing forward.
Right. And you're
So,
also in your TPI deck too, your game pieces are more important because they're
mm,
combo pieces. Whereas for me, sometimes I'll be sitting with like if I have like a counter spell in hand, um, I might just let I might just let a pinger die sometimes.
mm,
That happens where like there's bigger fish to fry and I'm not concerned. Maybe the game is going really slowly and all I need to do is kind of like sit back. Maybe maybe it's helpful to me to see for the table to see that pinger go. Right, that's the table strategy that we're talking about. And so in Clay's list, he plays a lot of like Mizium Skin, intervene, things that protect one thing. Whereas for me, my biggest concern, sweepers. So like intervene doesn't do the trick for me. Disruption protocol, ice out. That's the one thing you're going to notice about my counterspell suite is that all of it hits
mhm.
pestilence. Okay, all of it hits drown in
Target
sorrow.
spell, target spell.
All of
Yeah.
it hits crypt rats. Yeah,
Hmm.
target spell. Arcane denial. The only one is dispel, but dispel is so efficient that we're gonna play it anyways. But yeah, target spell. Right. That's definitely where we want to be. Another card you could consider for in here as well would be mana leak. Um, because I think mana like pip requirements are challenging in this deck.
In metas where like right now we're kind of dialed back a little bit from that real fast combo
Yep.
meta that we had a few months ago. So in the fast combo metas, mana leak is really good to consider because everybody's lean on
Yes.
mana. Now where we have like fair decks are more prolific, you find people do have that additional mana because they're leveraging
Hmm.
a threat or something like
Right.
that, and then they're passing a turn with 3 4 mana open.
Yeah.
So being able to pay that is probably more frequent at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's totally true. And I think that like you just gotta like, and these things are like flexible slots. Like if I were to cut something to bring in mana leak, it might be like logic knot, it might be make disappear. I really do favor cards that have this sacrifice effect. It puts you neutral on creatures, which it has its downside. But the fact is, Echoing Truth is one of the most played cards in the entire format. And let me just give you a
Hmm.
little bit of data on that. Bodarn has produced. Bodarn and Clay work together for cpdh.guide, do a lot of data analysis. Of the top cards played in the tournament, Echoing Truth was number 6. It is the sixth most played card in the tournament. And Echoing Truth is a devastating answer to what we do. Okay, it bounces not only our stuff, but it also bounces all of Abdel's stuff.
Yeah. So
So
so connect the pieces there. So uh, Ryan's
Heartfire,
strategy.
Club,
Yeah, Ryan's strategy leans in on these cost reduced spells based on improvise, convoke, yada yada
mm-hmm,
yada. So in the absence of having the bodies available, he just isn't able to progress his game plan.
yeah,
So he is really proactive if they're, really proactive in protecting that arsenal
right.
of or that inventory to make sure that he can leverage those
A
spells
lot of bodies in
at
play
those
means
costs.
I can block with a lot of creatures. It means that I can draw a lot of cards. It means I can counter a lot of spells.
Mhm.
More bodies equals more action economy in TPI. And
Mm.
there's a lot of different ways that translates. So things you can do to prevent something like an Echoing Truth, targeting your own creature with a Resculpt is a great way to do it. Just turn that thing into a 4/4. Resculpt is an amazing ambush viper. Just want to point that out. I've had some godlike moments recently where somebody like attacks with something that they didn't expect that I would block against, and I just go Resculpt targeting some random artifact like an astrolabe, and I just line that 4/4 up against them. But when you use it for removal, the beauty of Resculpt is that you give them a 4/4, and then they have to decide whether they just want to eat one token a turn for the rest of the game, or whether they want that thing to do damage to somebody, because it's not doing damage to us. It might eat one token a turn, right? And that's a sad use of it.
That's not a flyer.
No, it's not a flyer. It's just a stupid 4/4. So this is a really good card for that. But then, of course, for stopping Echoing Truth, we have Improvised Club, Heartfire. We have Collateral Damage. All of those can do that as well. We also have, if you're worried that you're gonna, you can use Ice Out. If you don't think that you can use it to actually bargain away the token. There's some weird instances where you might actually do that. Like if you're not confident that your counterspell is going to work. Like if you think somebody else is going to back up the Echoing Truth player, then you definitely bargain and just make that happen. And then we've got Make Disappear can do the same thing. And yeah, so variety of different ways to do that. But a couple other questions we had here as well. By the way, Too Much Do, thank you so much. That was really sweet. He says, because I play the deck a lot and because I believe in it, and I'm just getting a lot of reps in, that was part of the reason why I won. And I think that's definitely true.
I would argue that's probably the number one contributing factor to people winning tournaments.
Get familiar with your deck. Play the shit out of it. I think that a lot of people will play a deck and they won't have success with it, and then they'll bounce. They'll start drawing conclusions from it too early. They need to play a lot more games, right? And I've played a lot of TPI. I've played this in a lot of different variations of it, and I've evolved it over time, and now it's pretty well honed. There's a couple of changes that are probably imminent, and we can talk about those in a moment. But just to review the last other parts here, the other heuristic for TPI is just a density of incredibly cheap draw spells. Very important. You can see that here all the way up to Treasure Cruise, all of this right here is 1 or 0 mana. And that velocity is huge. We're not the kind of deck that's generating velocity so that we can kill people very, very quickly. We're generating velocity to get our engine online. This is kind of like the definition of a fair mid-range deck that wants to just it wants the velocity to get its engines online, right? And similar to Dalek would be the same reason. Running Dark Ritual in Dalek is less about dealing a bunch of damage to people. It's more about each token that comes into play can be sacrificed to draw cards and kill things, right? So I like that a lot. And for that reason, there's some things that may change in the deck. There's a couple of cards that are very, very interesting here that I've been playing around with a bit. And one of them is Ashnod's Altar. Ashnod's Altar has very few good homes in CPDH, ironically. It is
contributed to the Riches to Rags win.
Yeah, it was huge in the Riches to Rags. The Mighty Ramses named this as one of the more broken cards in the whole deck. Now, the Mighty Ramses also plays a deck that has a lot of these chonkier, bigger draw spells, particularly Foresee, which is the Scry 4 draw 2 on a 4 mana card, sorcery. And he just felt that the ability to dig 6 cards deep for 1 mana, because you would just sacrifice 2 tokens, you get one of them back, and you just cast it for a blue, was really important for his win. But that also for cards like Fireball, Rolling Thunder, Kverik's Torch, that kind of stuff, that you could really basically chain off in your turn super hard. He was also playing Energy Refractor, and Prophetic Prism, I believe. So he had ways to fix that mana into other colors. The problem I'm running into with Ashnod's Altar is that colorless mana, when you kind of look at the costs in the deck, it's a lot of red blue. It's not a lot of colorless. It's really nice with pingers, right? Being able to sack a token and cast a Witty Roastmaster for 1 red feels amazing. Doing it for all these cards, right? So for half of maybe like a third of the pingers. It's really nice. For cards like Reverse Engineer, you can use it so that you don't have to tap down your creatures. You can tap one down, sacrifice it for 2, and then pay the cost. So you can like tap, sacrifice, and you don't have to tap your board down as much, which is more attackers and more blockers. For cards like Distant Melody, it feels amazing because Distant Melody doesn't need to draw you 12 cards. It just needs to draw you 7. Okay, right? And so if it takes sacking 2 tokens, casting Distant Melody, getting one of them back to cast it for 1 blue, it means that you can pass your turn with a lot more available mana to interact with and to do stuff with those cards. 1 mana Keep Watch. There's good stuff. You can also cast Metallic Rebuke for just 1 by sacking a token instead of tapping them down if you need the blockers. Casting Murmuring Mystic for 1 mana. Very, very nice. That feels very good. 2 mana Filigree Attendant. So the question is, though, the colorless mana feels bad sometimes, feels amazing sometimes. Cards that you could play instead are plentiful. There's Infernal Plunge. This is a pretty powerful card, I would say. It's a dark ritual. It's a dark ritual in this deck, yeah, because we get the token and that we, but the red mana, sometimes not that great, and sometimes with like a Keep Watch where you'd love to use the red to pay for the Keep Watch. Those cards awkwardly interact because it's a sorcery speed, so you can't like sack to make the mana, attack, and then cast it, right? You know what I mean? It's just kind of
change of phases.
Change of phases, exactly. It's very good for getting pingers out early and then holding up interaction. So I've tested with it a little bit. It was awkward every time I played it, but I think there's some recency bias there. So if you want to play Infernal Plunge, go for it. I think that's a good card. Another one too, if you're trying to go budget, a couple of things you can cut is, and it hurts to say this, but Astrolabe, Ashnod's Altar, Skred. Those are the 3 things you can cut from this deck that make it very cheap, like $50. I had somebody ask me about that. And if you want
from a budget,
yeah, if you want a budget version of it, and Astrolabe does so much work in this deck, but and so does Skred. But like Voltage Surge replaces Skred really nicely. It's a 1 mana deal 4 that also sacks an artifact. So as a cost, so upside to that as well. And the other rituals that I want to talk about are actually, let's get these in the sideboard here, are Battle Hymn, which is a crazy card. This is a card sees play in 60 card quite a bit. Adds 1 mana for each creature you control at instant speed, right? Again, it's red mana, which can be really awkward. Cards like Battle Hymn in TPI are really, really good when you pair them with X spells. And there could be a build of TPI that I've not done yet that has like Rolling Thunder, Fireball, and then like
High Tide,
Battle Hymn, Infernal Plunge, right? Definitely because then with Ashnod's Altar, you just kill the table. You sacrifice all your tokens and you do it like Fireball for 30, right? That was another interaction in Mighty Ramsey's list that he really liked, was being able to just boom headshot people with his board. So there's that. And then High Tide is the other one. And High Tide might actually be the one that's most likely to come into the deck because it's blue mana and it's only 1. So I don't know. We'll see. Like cheap mana generation in this deck can take you a long ways. If this gets you to an early Distant Melody where you like Distant Melody for 5, that's really, really good because Distant Melody oftentimes feels like a mid-game, but if you can do it like early mid-game, feels great. So anyways, that's the list. The changes that may come down the line are going to be related to Ashnod's Altar, potentially. The other thing is that we don't have Boomerang in this deck, and I'd really love to have Boomerang back in the deck. I got oublietted twice in the tournament, back to back. And the thing that got me out from underneath the oubliette and caused me to win the finals was Moonsnare Prototype, of all things. It is the first time I have channeled a Moonsnare Prototype. I dug deep and I found it, bounced it back to hand on end step.
Shit, sorry about that.
The player who played it on me It was not a good play. It was very scary for the table. There were two combo players, and got locked underneath this thing, and wasn't able to use my interaction, which is a dynamic you have to be careful about. If you want to take a mid-range player out of the game early, you are denying the table that interaction, and they have a lot of it. But I was able to bounce it back to their hand. They replayed it on my TPI.
So let me
that's where Boomerang comes
hone in on that point real quick.
Yeah.
So when you're playing a deck such as Ryan's TPI list, and you're playing it from that passive role, you're passive in your game actions, but you're real active with your mouth, because you're talking to the rest of the players at the pod, saying, okay, and truthfully saying, this is what the board state looks like, this is why it looks this way,
and even offering information on my hand, right? Like, as a mid-range player, you do need to be able to play the table, and the social element of Magic is incredibly important. You do need to be able to recognize, you got to be able to speak other people's language. I don't try to make deals with people or to navigate table politics in ways that are obviously trying to screw them, right? I will openly say what I'm about to do is going to ping a lot, but this is probably what needs to be done, right? Or something along those lines. Be very, very clear with your intentions, and very clear with what it is you are doing to people, because people don't like to be pinged a lot. But yeah. So anyways, Boomerang is another card that I'm kind of wanting to bring in. 1, because Gretchen is very good. 2, it still deals with Abdel. 3, it deals with lands. And 4 is it can tag something like an Oubliette. Now, that's the first time I've been Oublietted in a very long time. Oubliette's not seeing a lot of play right now.
Ironically, it's come out of the list.
Oh, out of yours?
No, out of Aaron's. It never
Aaron's.
was. It never was in mine.
Yeah. I think that Oubliette is a great card for certain decks, but it's also 3 mana. It's sorcery speed, and
I think it's poopy.
It can cause that player to go at you for the rest of the game, and this is a big problem. It's almost too oppressive, right? Because when I was in that game, I was starting to have to think about, am I just going to have to try and burn Aaron out of the game to get my commander back, right? That was if I can't find Echoing Truth, if I can't find Moonsnare Prototype, I'm just dead in the water.
It's so funny. I can recall a year ago, the big discussion, maybe 14 months ago now,
about whether it should be banned.
Whether it should be banned, and the funny thing is the reason why people were complaining about wanting it to be banned is because they claimed it created an unbalanced game scenario. Well, the solution to that is, as we've discovered, is to seek to rebalance the game state by taking that person out of the game.
Yeah.
So I find
if you Oubliette somebody's commander, there's a really good chance the rest of the table is going to be oh, they're not a problem anymore. You are. That's the problem with the card. Now, it's still really good. There's a lot of reasons to play it. I think that, in my opinion, Gary, great reason to play it. There are certain combo decks that are just completely turned off by it, and I think that that's really, really good if you want to buy time. So, one of the things that I will do if I have an Oubliette is, if you Oubliette a Gretchen or you Oubliette an Abdel or something like that, then you can attack the other combo player and feel a lot safer. So, if there's 2, right, that's a good way to use it.
I'm a little halfway in on that, and I'll tell you why. So Oubliette's text reads that once Oubliette is gone, the creature enters the battlefield tapped.
No, it phases.
Oh yeah.
So there's no ETB trigger.
So it reemerges into existence.
It poofs
in a tapped state.
Yes.
So when you're for Gretchen and Abdel, the main issue with trying to Oubliette something like that is, as a combo player, of course, I don't play either one of those decks, but as a combo player looking at that scenario, I'm going to leverage that politically to say, oh, guys, I'm turned off.
So there's that risk. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then when I'm ready to combo, I'm just going to, because Gretchen, you can activate Gretchen tapped.
Yep,
Same,
absolutely.
you can flicker Abdel
So
tapped. Doesn't
you could
matter.
basically do your combo, get to a
Mm,
bounce spell, bounce it, draw your cards. Right now, the difference is that in that scenario, there's two combo players at the table. I think they're going to have a hard time arguing that the other one isn't the problem. Right. So I
mm,
think that's where like Oubliette works well in that scenario. But the problem of it and the price of it is important to be cognizant of. It can, one, if the player has a good board state, they will suicide themselves into you because that might be the only option they have. If they're mono red, that's all their deck has, right? And that's scary. That's very scary. You get someone who's just like gonna, run you down for the rest of the game, throw every spell they have at you, and it might actually be correct because they need their commander to function, right? And that's very common dynamic in the format. The second problem being that if you take somebody out of the game and you're the next most powerful player, you're the next most favored position in the pod,
mm.
you make yourself the enemy. So keep that in mind with Oubliette. Finhorn Brownie says here, I would Oubliette a TPI if you can disrupt a combo turn with other interaction. Oubliette on TPI stops the engine that's online over more than one turn. So I think Finhorn that there's elements of that depends on the context, right? So in this particular game, it was a turn through Oubliette, and the problem with turn through Oubliette. So I hadn't made anything, right? I hadn't done anything with it yet, and the problem is with the TPI is if you turn off the TPI and I haven't done anything with it, you're actually turning off a lot of spells in my hand that you need at the table probably to survive against the combo player. So a good example of this was the Common Cause tournament. I had my TPI Tithing Bladed on turn 2, and it basically stuck like Galvanic Blast, Counterspell, and Metallic Rebuke all in my hand, and then we died to the combo player a turn afterwards. And so like in the mid game or something, an Oubliette on a TPI, once they've already kind of achieved the function that is important to you, which is not dying to
Mhm.
the combo player, then putting an Oubliette on them opportunistically, I think there's nothing wrong with that. It's just early game. You want to be careful about hating it out because the engine where they're creating the 1/1s is also the engine by which they can shatter the source, outnumber, improvise club and heartfire, galvanic blast, collateral damage, and then also disruption protocol, ice out, make disappear, stoic rebuttal. Like you're turning off so much of their interaction, and that's not good for you. So that's kind of what I mean by that. So context is really important here when
Mm.
it comes to that. Anyways, but those are the cards. Another thing I just wanted to mention, just as a last point here, towards the burn plan that I've been really excited about, is the inclusion of Mob Justice. This card has been an overperformer for me lately, and might be the reason that eventually I play a Muddle the Mixture. I don't play Muddle the Mixture because it doesn't counter Pestilence and it doesn't counter Crypt Rats. And it doesn't counter certain other forms of removal, right? But Mob Justice is sometimes like a 2 mana, somebody's dead, which is very efficient. And because we're a burn deck, right? We're a mid-range passive burn deck, which is a weird thing to say. This card has been very good. So
You're the only one that does it, you know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it worked. The last things, Deduce and Demand Answers here were
Mhm.
new additions from Murders at Karlov Manor. Both of them have been fabulous, fabulous. Deduce, making a clue token, is another thing that we can tap to improvise, sacrifice. You can tap it to Moonsnare prototype, and it's also just sitting there being a draw at whatever stage of the game you want. It contributes to affinity, and it's instant speed. And ironically, if you look through like a lot of the draw spells in here, they're almost all sorcery.
Mm.
Thoughtcast, Shared Discovery, Treasure Cruise,
All the good
Reverse
ones are,
Engineer.
aren't they?
Yeah, all
Yeah.
the good ones are except for Keep Watch, which you can use on other players too. If somebody attacks you, you can Keep Watch and draw cards instant speed that way. But nothing where you can be like 4 mana, behold the multiverse on end step, right? And so Deduce and Demand Answers introduced that. Demand Answers also, another one of these cards with additional cost, sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. This card is really cool because in the early game, when you don't have bodies to sacrifice or when you don't want to, like when you want to build velocity, you just discard a card. It's just Thrill of
Mm.
Possibility. You just thrill of possibility it away and keep moving. Late game, it's a 2-mana draw 2. And we play this over Perilous Research, which is kind of the same thing, except that you must sacrifice a permanent with this. So eventually Perilous Research will probably come into the deck because it's just 2-mana draw 2s are very good in the deck. But yeah, that's kind of that.
At instant speed.
At instant speed, yeah, for blue as well, which is great. Actually, I really like that Demand Answers is red because sometimes we have more red than we need, but we need the red to function as a deck. So we can use the red, still have 1 up for a lightning bolt, keep our blue for counter spells. It's pretty cool. So yeah, that's kind of the list right now as it sits. Some of the it feels really good to play. There's probably just a couple of adjustments coming down the line. But without further ado, though, I want to look at the deck you played, Clay, and we have it right here. Clay played Sir Conrad in a control build. There are some changes that have been done to this list since the tournament, and we'll talk about it. Yeah, just one, which is Corpse Churn. But yeah, Sir Conrad has been making a resurgence. It's kind of even though it's not the mono black deck that I play, it is kind of been in a lot of ways like the poster child for mono black and cEDH because this card has so much damn text on it. It's a big body for 5 mana, and it just has like a library written on it that rewards you for a wide range of activities.
Well, a lot of you old heads will know that I've been playing Conrad for years, and it started out ironically as the first like aggro deck.
Yeah,
it feels so weird to say that, but it was Conrad Rat Colony, and basically just leveraging your rats, throw rats, and then seeking ways to of course you're benefiting incidentally on the rats dying because they're just 1-butts, but then finding ways to just do like some major like damage with an echoing return or something like that,
or Bajuka Bog, or a Felden's Cane, or just
what have you. Yeah, these big opportunities. And at the end of last year, so there's actually 2 lists, and we talked about the other one. There's one that's Aaron is piloting, and the common thread between the two, of course, is Gatorbait. He's the one that actually is like, hey, why don't you rebuild this deck, you knucklehead? And I'm like, he's like, well, let's try this thing. And I was like, okay, we'll give it a shot. And basically what I did was, it was a dual focus. I updated the rats list at the same time that I updated this control list. And eventually, and really this control list was meant to be a mid-range list because, the data report from the end of last year gave mid-range kind of a poor grade on the year as far as like tournament showing and stuff like that.
Control
and
was in a similar place too. It was just like, and it was really not so much that they were like bad. It was that combo was overperforming, and I think that's kind of what the data.
Well, the idea was to take and kind of do a lessons learned, quintessentially a necropsy on last year, and then from my perspective, try to figure out what we could change, whether or not it was like how you approach the deck construction or how you approach the gameplay, like trying to look at little variables and whether or not we're more proactive, because Ryan is going to sound horrible the way I'm going to say it, but it's not what I'm meaning. So Ryan being the figurehead for mid-range over the last like little bit, not to say that other people haven't played it, but being the person, Ryan has a very reactive, passive kind of style, and he takes that tack with a lot of his decks, not all of them, but a lot of them are just kind of this, hang back and negotiate, Conchad, nice, negotiate the table and that kind of stuff. That's not me at all. So I had to build something that was more forward and I could just be proactive from turn 1. So that's a nice little pivot into looking at, originally I was looking at, because everybody knows Loyal Subordinate has a really aggressive life drain kind of style, kind of theme.
Deck. Yeah. Great
And
commander.
originally the game plan was to leverage that. Okay, like, all right, we're going to do Conrad things. We're in mono black. Let's start just life draining the table, yada yada yada. The problem with that is, so everybody can remember a time around this last Christmas when we had a person, doing a lot of gameplay, and it just turns out that they were kind of gaming the system a little bit, for the lack of a better term, and they were exhibiting an outrageous rate of turn 4 wins. So this deck was actually kind of birthed during that era where you had to be like really heavily prepared for a turn 4 win.
Yep.
So I discovered that in that environment, because those turn 4s were coming pretty consistently, in that environment, the life drain stuff was doing absolutely nothing to help me. And I was already playing the best suite of mono black removal that I could muster up, right? So I was like, okay, how can I mitigate this? And that's when I found the festering creatures.
Yes.
So the festering creatures are great because I pair them with some sack outlets, some static sack outlets. There's some spell-based ones as well for little tricks and stuff like that. But like Thought Picker Witch is great for picking off combo pieces off the top of people's libraries. You can scry off of the Viscera Seer.
Bloodseeker would be in there too.
So,
and then answers like your Innocent Bloods as well being
exactly
right, and the rituals
so
here
all of this
showing
early stuff, like a turn. Okay, shout out for Plagued Rusalka. Plague Rusalka is like the best type of creature in this effect, because you can sack any creatures to put -1/-1. So if you take a festering creature and you sack it with a Rusalka for -1 mana, it's -2/-2, which takes care of Malcolm.
Right. So this particular build, and if we're thinking about what problems this solves, and this is something we should always be like really clear about, is like what are you playing? What do you expect to have trouble with based on your colors and what you have access to in those colors? And I think in it's like your line of thinking is actually was in parallel, but without us really knowing, except with a different set of cards, right? And I think like for me and my black decks lately, I am really focused on 0 and 1 mana kill spells. And then the next category is most of them are going to be 2. There's a couple of black kill spells that make the cut despite not being 2 mana, but instant speed, they kill a Malcolm, they kill an untapper, 1, 0, or 2 mana, right? And so we're talking about like Defile, Disfigure. Disfigure is a card that many of you from the Pauper community are going to be familiar with as just a really cheap way to interact with like fairies and whatnot. But yeah, Disfigure, Defile, Snuff Out, Ghastly Demise, Vendetta, Spinning Darkness.
So the intersection between the festering type creatures and the sack outlets, and there's an abundance of recursion in here that recurs back to hand. So you can create these loops. Now it's not the most efficient thing that you can do by casting a 1 mana creature, sacrificing it usually for a mana, and then paying another mana to bring it back, and then you sacrifice it again. Like that's a number of jumps to go through, another number of hoops to go through to deal with a Malcolm. But when you want to like, number one, Conrad counts creature types.
Yes.
So when you want to leverage Conrad's ability and ping the table, you are forced into dealing with those problems from that creature type position.
Yeah,
so,
which is 35 creatures in this deck, right?
Yeah,
and that's
which is sometimes not enough.
It's and it's a high number, right? Because when you think about slot allocation, you've got 100 cards in your deck. You're probably going to allocate 40 of them to mana sources. That's kind of a common number that we see.
And sure, and I could play 35 lands, 8 mana rocks, and 21 instants and sorceries, and be able to control the table all day long. But the problem is you won't get benefit off of Conrad.
You won't get as much. I think that this is,
Yeah.
and this is, we've talked about this quite a bit, and I'll probably be doing a video for those of you watching. Keep this one on your radar. We'll probably be doing a video on Sir Conrad of kind of how I envision to do the deck, and really like Conrad, like I said at the beginning of this chat about Conrad, this card incentivizes a lot of different game actions and a lot of different classes of cards. The first one, whenever a creature dies, or whenever a creature dies, okay. Right there, edicts become massive burn spells. If you resolve a Fleshbag Marauder with Sir Conrad in play, everybody takes 4. You basically, you dunked on the table. You did 12 damage. You know, if everybody takes 4 is a lot. So that's really good. It also works with sweepers. Black does sweepers really well. Drown in Sorrow, Pestilence, Crypt Rats, Evankar's Justice. There's so many different things where this burn is triggered. It also just works with targeted removal too. And it does it to each. So if you were to like kill 2 things with like or if you just like Echoing Decay a TPI player, you could kill the whole table. You could easily kill the whole table. You Echoing Decay an Abdel. You know, the last game I played against Abdel, they had 12 tokens in play on like turn 5. After flickering their commander 3 times, which was pretty nauseating.
So you're actually, and I'm glad you brought that up because I'm going to pivot off of that.
But yeah,
so,
one last thing. I just want to note the other modes that we have here before we transition. Or a creature is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield. So mill, right? Specifically mill. Or a creature leaves your graveyard.
Your graveyard,
right? So there's kind of like the Sir Conrad control, where you're just like, you've got this big black commander that pings people, right? And it has a mana outlet on it where you can mill everybody and deal damage to them. Or you have your Sir Conrad that mills itself, has a very high creature count, really wants to lean into the activated ability where they're like, activate 5 times, I mill 3 creatures or 2 creatures or whatever your average would be for there. Everybody else mills some. So that's kind of why like I'm interested in Sir Conrad, because it's just a lot of things you can do with it. And all of them play well with this fucking card. So anyways, I just wanted to mention that and wrap that little bow around the Sir Conrad.
So now I can't remember what I was gonna, but like
you were talking about the first mode, about the edicts, the sweepers, the Echoing Decay, the tokens. Yeah.
So edicts. So this deck started to come together at the end of last year, and if you recall, scam was a big topic at the end of last year. So this was an opportunity to lean into, to discover what scam would look like from a Pauper Commander perspective. And it's not necessarily I didn't lean into the flicker version of the scam, the gray flicker version of the scam. Mine is more heavily devoted towards the reanimate, the recursion side, because Conrad, the main reason is Conrad is one of those high value targets for opponents, especially when you start getting to work. So putting it to the command zone a bunch of times makes it really impossible for you to cast. So you just let it go to the graveyard, pay 1 mana, get it back to your hand,
skip
play without
tax.
Or Tortured Existence, just feed it back and forth. But like Ryan was saying, my very first build of Conrad, the Rats version 2 years ago, was focused on leveraging all of those modes. I had the discard from hand creatures. I had the onboard sacrifice outlets. I had Echoing Return to get all of the stuff. In fact, I was even looking for this Magic Christmas Land where I'm instant speed, Song of the Damned, for X number of rats, pay 2 mana, get, with Death Denied at instant speed, getting all of those out of the yard and then discarding them, via discard creature. So like you're like the amount of instant speed lines is like it's crazy. The algorithms here. The issue being is like having played that Rats version of that deck with that setup for 6 or so 8 months, like I never hit that moment where I was ever moving cards freely between zones and all that stuff.
And this is doing a lot more recursion than your Rats builds were, right? Because the looping of the creatures, that's another way to get a creature to enter and leave your graveyard, right? So
Yep.
that's basically that's another way to burn. So if you were to think about Conrad, it kind of is like in two categories of Conrad: what we do to ourself, and that being our game plan, and what we do to others. And so I think that that's like a really good way to organize one's thinking around Conrad. And this deck is what we do to ourselves with a little bit of what we do to others. Like your control game plan is to loop these Edict creatures, Demon's Disciple,
Yeah.
Fleshbag
Yeah.
Chain.
Turns 1 through 5. I want no one to have anything.
Yeah.
Like nobody has anything. All they have is lands in play. That's the major goal of the deck, is to own that
And
first phase.
there's even more. Like you don't have this is the removal fleshbag package, but you've got Innocent Blood, Extract a Confession, Tithing Blade, and Vraska's Fall. So we're looking, and really, if you look at each one of these cards, if they tag a minimum of 3 creatures, right? Because sometimes like Vraska's Fall doesn't hit your own, Tithing Blade doesn't hit your own, Extract a Confession doesn't hit your own, Innocent Blood might not hit your own. All of those, they're going to deal a minimum of 3, probably 3 to each player, right? So you're dealing 9. So each one of these mass edicts can be seen as 10% of the table's life total, which is really good math to be doing. Now you might say, and I think I've had conversations with people about this where they challenge that notion of how like what is that like math you're doing, because it supposedly gets worse when people leave the game. When people leave the game, then the damage that you lost doesn't matter because they're not in the game, right? So you're still dealing a damage proportionate to each player as to their starting life total. So if you deal 3 to a player versus 9 to the table, that's still 10%, right?
It hurts a little bit. It hurts a little in Conrad because you lose that opportunity of flipping a creature off of that vacant player, which would do an additional damage to the rest of the players.
Yeah, which probably
But
has something to do with like Conrad not wanting one player to die super early. Sometimes decks like this where you have an ability that says some each, or it has like myriad or something like that, you don't really want to take a player out of the game, because it like reduces your engines, and that can be definitely true here. We've got Beachbod. Adam, what's up, dude? Good to see you, man. The flesh bag is dangerous, man. Yeah, I mean the edicts are an interesting thing right now. They vary in quality.
There aren't a lot of creatures that have big bodies in the deck, and what he just said about having a symmetrical life total experience for your opponents, like you'll leverage Conrad or a Rot Tide or something like that, a Slum Reaper where you don't sacrifice the Slum Reaper to itself. A large-bodied creature like that, you'll kind of leverage at the opponent that has the higher than the rest life total to keep them all even. Yeah.
Like if there's a person gaining a lot of life, maybe, or in a pinch, you can just punch the player who needs to die. So those are all like options. But it's funny, we've come full circle here, because in talking about TPI and talking about pinger decks, Conrad is a pinger deck, right? It's just that we have it in the command zone. Right. And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. But for those of you watching, I highly recommend you look into these different decks that really leverage pinging. So there's another deck that I want to, that wasn't part of this tournament, but sort of follows in this line of thinking. It's not Viscopa, but that also does this sort of a thing. And that is Thrall Parasite. And going into this tournament, Thrall Parasite was really high on my list of decks to potentially play. This is another deck that basically, Gary, Sir Conrad, Loyal Subordinate, Thrall Parasite. There's so many, I mean, even Dalek to a degree. They're all decks that are like doing a good job of leveraging damage on everyone, right? And the reason that is so good and so important, whether you're playing, especially if you're playing aggro, okay? But like, for the other archetypes as well, is that when you want to pivot onto another player after your prime target is done. So like in a mid-range deck, we're often playing a series of 1v1s or sometimes we'll take out a player, like a combo player, and then everybody will try and come after us, and we play a 2v1, and we have something like the Monarch or the Initiative or whatever to like tackle that 2v1. When we pivot to that stage of the game where we're having to take out another player or another 2 players, those people being at a reduced life total is really important to being able to close the game out. And so if you're an aggro player, it's even more important because you're if you kill a player in aggro, you still have two other players to kill. And if their life totals are unmolested, like you have not done anything to them, you have 60 damage to deal. Pingers are a really important way to make sure that everybody is going down at the same time while you keep your target priority locked in. Adam says, Thrall Parasite is a low dopamine cheese pinger for sure. A low dopamine cleanse pinger. Oh, that's so funny. Thrall Parasite is a low dopamine cleanse pinger for sure. The extort cost isn't as layered as is it, but the life gain though. Yeah.
I wonder.
So
I've been thinking about this for a while.
yeah.
I wonder how possible it would be to build a Thrall Parasite Stormy type of deck where you are just like banging those, like, I don't know what the potential velocity for the number of black spells you can cast, in this,
It's pretty hard. I mean, if it was always hard to do in Witherbloom Apprentice, and Witherbloom Apprentice is a second color. I think that the part of the trouble with that is that extort costs us mana. It's not just a free trigger. So in a storm build, I almost think that it would be impossible. Like and the other thing that's weird is that when you do sort of stormy stuff and you're gaining life at the same time, you can make yourself a target when you don't really want to be. Like Thrall Parasite is a good.
If you're concerned with that kind of
well,
thing.
or you could say like if the life gain is keeping you alive, maybe that's part of it. Is you're saying like I'm basically like manning up to the damage by gaining a bunch of life, knowing I'm going to be hit, and that's going to keep me alive. But that's basically like I just don't think it would work with Thrall Parasite in particular. But there's maybe other decks where you could do something like that.
That's fair because you have
to pay mana for each one. You have to pay basically one mana for every storm. Is kind of one way to look at it.
And there's not enough spells, like for example, what's the ritual that sacks a creature?
Oh, Culling the Weak.
Culling the Weak.
Yeah. Culling the Weak.
Ritual. Too many cards, man. So there's not enough.
Muck.
There's not enough like weird mana positive spells that you could chain and go through.
Yep.
Yeah, and that makes sense now in my head because currently building a Witherbloom deck.
Yeah.
The goal of that list is not necessarily, ironically, to storm off, which is the thing that I always wanted to do.
It is a backup plan, but when you're playing Witherbloom, you just get to put these storm spells in your deck, and they can do a lot of damage. This was the other choice, and it kind of relates to Conrad in a way because it's a mono black deck. We have some similarities in terms of like playing a lot of mana sources. We have like the Bubbling Muck, 12 pieces of rock ramp here. Clay is on 37 lands and on 4 major rituals, so it puts him up to about 41 mana sources. I'm on a little bit more than that with 34 land sources and 12.
35 lands and 2 swamp cyclers.
Okay, all right, Clay. That's 37. Yeah. Plus, those are even better. I almost wonder in your deck whether you would benefit from just even like swapping in as many swamp cycling cards as you can.
Well, I told you,
like you could bring in like the rampaging Spiketail and the Injector Crocodile are both options as well. One of the cool things, by the way, about those cards is that they find Witch's Cottage, and so I
think 2 is plenty though. Like, and that's the thing for the way that I like my goal with the deck, because you're right. There's probably 5 swamp cyclers now, 4 or 5.
4. Well, there's 3 good ones. You have Gloomfang Mauler, Troll of Khazad-dûm, and Spiketail, Rampaging Spiketail.
So when I think about the things that I want to be doing, paying 2 mana
4.
to.
This is a great card.
Yeah.
It's a 5/3 regenerate
paying 2 mana to put a creature in the yard to go get a swamp. I don't know. I mean, let me give it some thought.
In your deck, because you have 35 untapped lands, That's, I think, where it makes sense, because each one is not really, it's a modal land, right? It's a way to artificially increase your creature count. So like if I were doing like with my
So
Conrad, that'll probably
so
have
that's
something similar.
exactly the perspective I'm thinking about
Yeah, so
is
artificially increasing your creature count, and they still find lands, and their secondary mode, which is to
so I would
find
still,
a witch's cottage, is really really synergistic.
because right now my my rubric for keepable hands is a minimum of 2 lands and at least one piece of meaningful interaction for the pod that I'm at for the
Oh yeah,
fastest deck.
and you're almost
So
guaranteed to have that with your land count is like so high that you will get the lands you need for sure.
so there is an opportunity to
Hmm.
explore, putting in the, especially where because I just thanks to Ryan in our discussion the other day, I added one more reanimation
Yeah.
opportunity. So being able to like really get in, and I want even more being
Hmm.
able to, because I love this, mill 3 cards and then
Instant
get
speed, get a creature. It's
any
fabulous. Use
creature.
it during your
So
main
like,
phase to chain together 2 fleshbag marauders, or use it at end step to get your Gary back. Like there's so many
yep.
different things you can do with it.
Or in this new thing that we're talking about, getting a swamp cycler if you're
Right.
stuck on
Well,
land.
and that's part of the thing that's really cool about these cards that I've identified in my deck building, is that these cards give you like they build in win conditions into your deck. In the late game, when you draw Troll of Khazad-dûm, you have very good chance you can just win the game with it, because everybody's low resources. If you have something like a Gloomfang Mauler, it's even faster because it's coming down. It's immediately giving your Sir
Mm.
Conrad Menace +2/+2. Those are counters, so it's now hitting for 7, and these are all great things to reanimate too. There's basically like putting these chonky creatures, and I think it actually works better in your build than in mine, because I'm not running as many lands, and so I can't just cut lands. But because you're running 35 actual lands,
Mm.
if you had, for example, 33 lands and 4 land cyclers, that would ultimately still put you at 37 land sources, which is a huge, huge number. And those cards, there's also ways you can just get damage with them. You go cycle Gloomfang Mauler, get Witch's Cottage, ping everybody, and then play Witch's Cottage, put it back on top, that pings everybody again. So you can look at that interaction as a deal 2 to everybody, deal 6 to the table. And they're just like good win conditions. Twisted Abomination is such a cool card. It's like a
OG.
Gurmag
Yeah.
Angler that regenerates, man. It's so
Well,
sweet.
the regeneration is nice because you do have the opportunity to do global damage between your Crypt Rats and your
Right.
Pestilence and all that stuff. My beta Pestilence, by the
Oh
way.
yeah, yeah. Clay and I both on those awesome versions of Pestilence. I'm actually really stoked. I forgot that some of the winnings for the Sanctuary tournament were the black, the exclusive like black choose your own adventure style proxies that Meximat makes.
Beta
That's actually
Pestilence.
included in it, which is sweet. It'll be
Nice.
Pestilence, Snuff Out, Spinning Darkness. I think there's Tortured Existence, I think, is in there. There's a couple of them. So yeah, Beta Pestilences are very nice. Clay and I
Here,
both got them. Yeah,
I'm
let's.
gonna
Where's mine?
I'm gonna whip
Yeah,
I'm gonna whip this sucker out here
where is mine? Oh
and
yeah,
touch it inappropriately.
we show off our Beta Pestilences. Let's see, there
And
it
it's
is.
funny because when you hold it up, oh yeah.
Oh, it's so
So
pretty. Don't show it just yet. Here, I gotta simultaneous this thing here. Where is it? Oh, I got the foil Phyrexian Gargantua. God, it's so sick. Looks so nice. Yeah, Trespasser's Curse. I gotta update my paper list as well. Oh, there it is. Oh yeah, yeah. All right, chat. 1, 2, 3. Oh. Mmm. Yeah, it's
and
nice.
what's funny is like when you look at it up close to like a newer, I say newer, and I'm holding up a Tortured Existence. Look how black the edges of that beta is. It is like midnight black. So
It is spicy, and actually, not to imply a one up here, but
well,
there's
it depends
another
on what you're grabbing.
there's another pestilence here that I've got that I picked up at um, when we were in Vegas. And it is, where is it here? It's in my Real Surreal deck. Oh yeah. Oh, this is so sick. It is a Italian foreign collection pestilence, which is like printed kind of not that long after, and it says peste, and it's all like in what looks like Latin because it's Italian, right?
Mhm.
So it looks really cool. It's got the
Sorry,
same
I'll
appearance.
I'll do a similar flex.
Oh, 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 oh.
Foil
Seventh?
unearth.
Is that a seventh edition? It must be. Kind of looks like it.
Urza's.
Urza's? Yeah. Oh, that is so nice. Yeah, those old bordered cards, man. I just wish they'd go back to making the foils like that
I
because they just had
I
it. They had it right back
I
then.
s- I saw it and it had the $50 label on it, and I'm like, yeah,
It's expensive. I want it.
I want it.
That's how it
Conrad's worth
translates.
it.
One
Anyway,
one card I
anyway.
brought up here there when we were talking about these cycling creatures though is Rampaging
Yeah,
Spiketail. I like this one in your deck too because you can it gives you a little power buff too, which is kind of nice. So you can take something like a
and
Cadaver
gains
Imp and it gains
and
indestructible.
gains
It gains
indestructible.
indestructible less important, but if you're punching through something that you wouldn't otherwise win in combat, that's a way to do it. It allows you to punch. Like for example, say there was a Dargo player and you wanted to kill them this turn and you gave Conrad the indestructible, and Dargo is all they had to block with, they would
Hmm.
have to, it would turn into removal basically. But you can also put this on a Cadaver Imp or an Eye Blight or an Eye Collector and give it a little
Well,
extra power.
you know,
So
I'll even up you one that. So I'm playing two Grave Flickers spells in the list, and
you keep talking.
I have found that that's an adequate enough of those types of cards to ensure that you have them on a semi regular basis. Like when you, I don't know, they find themselves paired up nicely with those packages of spells that they lend themselves for, so the flesh bags and all that stuff. So with the Spike Tail, so I might like seriously try. I'll probably take out one swamp and put in the Spike Tail, because there's quite a few times where I have a sack outlet on board, or I have something else that, because I have 6 permanent based sack outlets and 6 spell based sack outlets, and putting a Spike Tail and then having a Grave Flicker, especially where I'm being able to sacrifice and give Conrad indestructible, or something like that. A little built-in Spike Tail. Now I got to look that up.
Yeah, one thing
Ah,
I wanted to mention about those as well is that they can actually do something really great to ensure the consistency of your starting hand. If you have a
hmm
low land count hand, what you can actually do is on that turn two, you basically cycle that creature.
hmm
You cycle that creature to find a Witch's Cottage, and then you play the Witch's Cottage, and you put that cycle creature back on top, and then you cycle it again on your next turn.
You can't
So
do it. You can't do it on turn 2 with the Witch's Cottage, can you?
no, but no. What I'm saying is, you go turn two, you play your land, end step, you cycle away that creature, get your land, and then when you go to your turn, if you haven't drawn another land yet, and you're worried that you won't,
Oh, because you need
you
3.
you cycle it away,
I
get
see.
another
Yeah, yeah.
land, play the Witch's Cottage, put it on top, and that's 5 mana, right? Like you've gotten yourself to that mana count,
There you
which is
go.
nice. It's really good. It works great with Crypt Rats as well, with other things like your Edict creatures and stuff. So I think they're all very premium and very good. And it just builds in these like win conditions into your deck, which is sweet. Just big chonkers. And yeah, so okay, so there's our two decks. Little, some strange similarities there in terms of the fact that they're applying damage symmetrically to the table, and they have different ways of interacting with the board that are unique to those decks. Like this black interaction package versus like the TPI using a lot of spells that really don't see play anywhere else, like Outnumber, Collateral Damage, Shatter the Source. Heartfire and Improvised Club do see a little more play, but Heartfire not really. It's mostly Improvised Club because it sacks artifacts, and then Massive Raid. All of these being very, very unique to this deck. So 2 different unique decks there, but let's take a look at some of the other ones we had here as well. We had a Sir Conrad in the top 4, piloted by Aggro Aaron. We had a Kedis Emberclaw Familiar. So this is your Malcolm Kedis deck that we all are kind of familiar with here. Nothing that we're unfamiliar with. It does have, you've got your Rite of Flame here, which is there to get us into a turn 2 Kedis, or to push out like a turn. You could do like a turn 1 Malcolm, potentially. He has Simian Spirit Guide, so you could go like Simian Spirit Guide, Rite of Flame, Island, Malcolm. That's an option, but basically things to get him into that quick mana. Removal mainly being these 2 sweepers here: Heated Debate, Thunderclap, Is It Charm, Scred, Lightning Bolt, but then the rest of it is counter spells. So nothing like crazy to see here. We do see 32 lands, and it's actually 33 because of Lorien Revealed. So that's actually a pretty disciplined number. I'm running less than that in my TPI deck. I'm running 32 total land sources. Is he running Lotus Petal as well? Yep, he's running Lotus Petal. Yeah, so pretty... Nothing here that looks unusual to me. We had a top 4 was Braybu playing Gretchen. And this one here, I don't think this was there was an unusual build of Gretchen piloted by EB Shine. Unusual just in that it was non-traditional. Like there was the Pilipala win condition.
Ray likes to do something interesting too, and I'm trying to remember what that is. Okay, so Crashing Drawbridge is in there.
Crashing Drawbridge for the haste, which is great. It's also a 0/4. It's tutorable with Mystic Sanctuary. I don't know.
Here I am trying to look through the rest of the list, and he brings up the big card.
Yeah. So yeah, Crashing Drawbridge is here. Secret Door, is that traditionally in the Gretchen list? I think it is.
Oh no, it's not.
Okay.
No.
This is nice. If you just make infinite mana, you sink it into here, and you kill everybody with the going through.
Well, I was looking. So Bray
dungeons.
likes to do something interesting with the Breeze Caller line, and I'm trying to look for the odd spell. Plays Vigian Graph Mage, which I'm a big fan of.
Yep, and this allows you basically. This gives you a form of haste, right? Because you play it, a creature enters, you give it a counter, and then you have the mana to untap it. Well, let's see. Wait, no. How does that work then? So they go.
Freed requires you to have haste. So you wouldn't.
You wouldn't be able to tap the creature. So what is the Vigian? Yeah. I wonder if he's. We could find it here.
No, it's not. Obor Breeze Caller is the line.
But what is the Vigian Graph Mage doing? Is it just another way to untap things? Yeah, sorry, folks, for the sneezes here. I'm getting
so Vigian Graph Mage has always required you to play the creature after the fact, and then you got to wait this other turn. I circumvent that in my Weaver's list by playing my land untappers first, then landing a Graph Mage, and then playing a 1 mana instant speed spell that untaps my my land untapper and puts a +1/+1 counter on.
Oh, like Snake. What would that be?
Veil.
Snakeskin doesn't untap though. It'd be like.
But Burst of Strength.
Burst of Strength. Interesting. Oh.
So Vigian Graph Mage, if you are going to play Vigian Graph Mage, you have to be able to apply a counter to that creature, that effective creature, after the fact, because Graph Mage always comes down second, and there's always been this weird timing, and people use that as a method to discredit. So you overcome that. So if you look through Bray's list and you find they may have added spells like I did.
There's a few different things about this list, actually. So the Llanowar elves, the Fyndhorn elves, all these 1 mana elves.
So look at Stony Strength and the protection there.
Stony
on the right
Strength
hand side.
Here.
Right.
So +1/+1 counter, untap it.
There it is.
And then Gaia's Gift does the... No, this just gives you a counter, but the counter still could be useful. Counter indestructible, all that. Snakeskin Veil puts a counter. So he's chosen here to play some interactive cards to defend that basically
Doesn't
leave a counter.
doesn't the merfolk there, the Sabo
And the Saba
Cryptomancer Attica
Cryptomancer, the Moonfolk, does as
backup?
well. Yeah, with the backup. So you back up onto something and then you can untap it with Vigian. I also noticed here the immobilizing ink, which seems to go in and out of these
Oh,
decks. It says discard a card, untap this creature, and this can be a way to win as well. To basically give yourself an untap on the
I can't
creature.
remember. I can't remember what the cards is, but like the number of cards is. But being able to like paired with Gretchen, you have to have X number of cards. You know, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. So this one's kind of cool. And then the other thing I was noticing as well is a somewhat lower land count than what Puzzle Box plays. I think Puzzle is on 35, I want to say, and then Lorien revealed, so kind of like
Mm.
36 ish. But it is actually important to count the actual lands in Gretchen because if you use the ability and you have Lorien revealed, it's not actually a land, so you don't put it into play. So just keeping that in mind. You can always cycle it with your mana to put it into play. But Llanowar Elves, Fyndhorn Elves, Elvish Mystic, and Boreal Druid, these are unique to this deck, I would say. I have not seen a
Mm.
Gretchen deck playing these. Looks like Bray was just looking for a little bit more velocity to get into the, get into the game that way. There's also this one here, Inspiration. This is an infinite
Target
uh,
player
target player. That's interesting. I
Yeah.
wonder.
at
Oh, it's
at
instant
instant
speed.
speed.
Instant speed. Very interesting. Because you would say like, oh, why wouldn't you just play deep analysis? It's a sorcery. The other thing is that inspiration is actually tutorable, where compulsive research and deep analysis are not
Hmm.
tutorable with merchant scroll. This is so because it's an instant. So this can be
I
a,
would
a
I
win
would play
condition.
Sapphire Charm over that, but
Sapphire Charm is really, really good. Talk about an amazing card right now. We can actually.
because then you could draw out all your opponents on the next upkeep. So all you have to do is pass the turn, and they just lose.
Plus, this card is just like such a devastating answer to an Abdel for 1 mana. You like Abdel comes into play, resolves, ETB on the stack, phase it out. No flickering, no tokens, no Abdel
Yeah.
to
Whoop.
block. And then when it enters, it doesn't enter. It phases back in and it comes in tapped for 1 mana at instant speed, also while being a draw card, right? And, giving something flying. There are decks where that's like highly relevant. I think I just added Sapphire Charm to
When it
Rail for that
when it
reason.
keeps you from dying, target creature gains flying is pretty good.
Oh yeah, somebody comes in with a big attacker and you just like grant something flying. That's actually really funny. That's one of the few ways in TPI we have to deal with a flying attacker as a blocker, right? Is with the Sapphire Charm. That's pretty funny. So maybe if we can't target it because they've got pro blue,
So
just
all
like
three modes are relevant. I
yeah,
remember a day when Sapphire Charm didn't have three relevant modes.
oh yeah,
With the uptick of fair decks, in the format, now Sapphire Charm is, all the way around relevant.
it's
So
very good, very very good. So yeah, anyways, Braybu had a very, very interesting list here. Actually, let's see, go back to this one there. Um, A lot of the other parts are standard here, but there's also the counter spells. They have a null, countering artifact or enchantment spells.
which is interesting.
Blue Elemental Blast, also one Hydro Blast that we don't see a whole lot of
Red
because,
sweepers.
I mean, it's for sweepers. It could be for a lightning bolt. It could be for a pinger.
Mhm.
This could be for, thunderclap. It could be for any of the red removal, basically. But then for non-removal things, it's going to counter pingers. It counters Ketis, or kills or counters Ketis. What else? It can deal with a Thermopod, which I encountered in the tournament.
Uh,
Somebody tried to go infinite with
one
Thermopod and Dargo. It deals with
one
Dargo.
of the Valus
Oh yeah, Shields
fail.
of Velis, or no, Blades of Velisfell. Yeah, it deals with that too. That's very interesting. But then the rest of it makes a lot of sense here. Although Flash Counter is one that it's been a long time since I put this card in any deck. Memory Lapse, great for combo decks, of course, and then Prohibit. So yeah, this is cool. Then let's see, let's go back to the top four here, or sorry, to the lists. We had a Dargo Keskit deck, which I played against. Very cool deck, piloted by this. I think they said their name was Lee, but they were
Yeah,
a really good sport. Really, great.
Lee was my last match.
Yeah. This was really cool. Keskit sacrificing 3 artifacts or creatures kind of immediately satisfies the condition for Dargo while also getting you value. And one of the problems with Dargo, traditionally, in my opinion, is that you have to put a lot of shit cards in your deck just to make Dargo work. And they're a one-time shit card. They're like, you put this card in your deck, you eat it up during your casting of Dargo, and then you've got Dargo, but you didn't get anything from the card. Keskit is a perfect complement because Keskit is like, I ate 3 cards, I looked 3 deep, and I kept 2 of them, and so now because this Dargo Keskit player, Lee, was like on like 7 cards the whole game. It was crazy. Very, very effective. Being able to
I think by the end, it was a game that the Killian player won eventually.
That was Brennan Lewin or Brennan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was them. It was Dave Alcadron on his Oni build, myself, and Lee.
Oh, I didn't know Dave was on Oni.
And at the end of it, I think at the end of it, I think Lee was paying like 18 for his Dargo.
Oh yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I could see that
because it's the only. I mean, it has a combo in here where you could do some first day of class
with
stuff.
The Thermopod. If you've sacked enough stuff, Thermopod, Pinger, like Witty Roastmaster Thermopod, Keskit Dargo, does it because the Keskit gets you all the sacrifices to reduce the cost, and then you can loop them. And he presented that. Somebody stopped him, but it was cool to see a fairly tidy combo.
So between Conrad keeping the board clear as Conrad does, you have Oni on top of that keeping the board clear it does.
And Death Rattle Oni. We folks might not know what this card is, but it's actually one that I when it first got spoiled, I was very interested in building it. But it's a 7 mana 5/4 flash, costs 2 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. And when it enters the battlefield, destroy all other creatures that will dealt damage this turn. So cards like Dry Spell, cards like Rancid Earth, cards like anything that deals, even an Evankar's Justice, right, which deals 2, or a Pestilence. Yeah.
Does Evankar's do 2 damage?
Evankar's Justice does 2 damage to everything. Yeah, including the players.
It's hard to remember which things say 2 life and 2 damage.
Well, in this one here, the cool thing is that it's not only, it's like heavily rewarding you for playing cards that don't always reliably kill things. And then this does, right? So like you ping the Dargo for 1, the Death Rattle Oni enters and it destroys all things that got pinged. So the pingers work really good against the small stuff, right? But the big stuff dies to the Oni. And when it's a 1 mana 5/4 flash, I mean that's pretty heavy metal, and it scales nicely too. Because if you kill a lot of things, then you skip the command tax, which is pretty sick.
I think the main issue that Dave ran into is that after all the things are dead and people aren't playing creatures anymore, then you have this really expensive commander.
Yeah, potentially. Although black decks have a lot of ways to finish the game outside of their commander, so it's not terrible, but yeah, that is something to consider. It does work really well with plunders too. I will say that. If you're like, Corrupted Conviction something away, that Corrupted Conviction netted you 1 mana with the cast of your commander because it cost 1 black, gave you 2 when something
maybe
died.
it could be another life gain drain style
Absolutely.
deck.
Yeah.
Where you're getting the value off of your enter and leaves creatures, and then you're like, screw it, I'm just going to blow them all up, and you're enacting the game plan partially yourself. Yep. It makes it able to recast the Oni when you have to.
This deck gets to play Whale of the Nim. This is I wouldn't say it's a pet card of mine, but because it has narrow homes, but there's a couple places where it's really good. 1 damage to each creature and each player for 3.
You're always trying to find a place for it,
dude. I mean, it's sweet. Like regenerate each creature you control. This is really good in a deck where you have things that you want to protect, but you also want a sweeper, and you don't want to kill your own stuff. So Wail of the Nim is really good in Gut. Gut, Agent of the Iron Throne, because the 1 damage would kill all of your 4/1s, right? But if you pay 4 for this, you can kill all the TPI and all the Abdel tokens, which are a problem for Gut, right? While also not killing your own stuff, right? Because you pay for the regenerate. Or somebody goes Fiery Cannonade and you go Wail of the Nim, just choose regenerate. And you regenerate everything you control. So Wail of the Nim, very cool card. Glad to see that playing here. What are the other ones that you play for 1 damage?
Yeah, one thing that I don't like about the algorithm that scrapes these decks is they don't scrape the tags. So if somebody's like, "Oh, these are all my damage cards," and they put them in under a tag,
Yeah,
oh,
I also find that to be rather difficult because tags are
not
really important for organizing like
not
a
to say
thinking.
that Dave has. Oh, there we go. Yeah,
Yeah,
Dave has put in the
there we go. Okay, so we've got not a
board wipe
lot of
left.
board wipe. Dry spell. Yeah, Psychotic Haze is one of them, which you can do off of a blood token for the madness cost, which is pretty cool. Gangrenous Zombies, Rancid Earth, Wail of the Nim. Not a ton of them, honestly, that are actually like available to us. Drown in Sorrow seems like
I
it would
think
still
he's.
be
I think
good.
he's playing all of them. Yeah,
Drown in Sorrow would still be good. It just wouldn't trigger the secondary ability on the
yeah.
Oni, which is where you destroy everything.
So
Um,
yeah, I think he's playing. I think he's playing every single
Dude, look at
damage
the edicts
spell.
though. Oh my god. So like this is a pairing that you're starting to see that I've got some, decks that do this as well. But when you use a card like Dry Spell into something like a Fleshbag Marauder, you're often going to tag the big things in play because the little things will all die to the Dry Spell. The big thing dies to the Fleshbag Marauder because it's the only thing left, which is pretty sweet. Also, I am so lucky that I didn't have to face this in the Sanctuary tournament. This would have eaten my breakfast. Oh my
Hmm.
god. Like this is the utter nightmare for a
So,
TPI player.
so what we were talking about earlier about this modicum of luck that comes around. Now, that's the thing. I've also had a discussion this very week about like people not correctly attributing rather the amount of luck. Like there is a non-0% of luck because your pod matchups, your pairings, like I haven't faced Ryan in the past two events.
Seed order, opening
Yeah,
hand,
yeah.
you like there's so much random shit going on, right? When you're in a tournament that you don't have control over. You just got to go in, pick your best deck that you can, and hopefully it's a deck that you're really comfortable with, very familiar with, right? Um, and do your dirty, right? Do what you can. So this is a very cool deck, though. I think Alcadron has created something really interesting here. I think the only thing I'm noticing,
Yeah,
you,
scan down the edicts for me.
so the
Let's
edicts
see
is
if
like all of them, including Abyssal Gatekeeper, which is
yeah, that bit him in the ass
oh, I
when we
bet.
played.
Yeah, this card is mm, borderline unplayable. It takes 2 creatures from you if you have a creature in play. Now, I think where Abyssal Gatekeeper does work is with Plunder. If you play turn 2 Abyssal Gatekeeper, turn 3 sack it to a Village Rites or a Deadly Dispute, then you don't have a
Mm.
creature in play. So you're getting it's basically a second copy of Innocent Blood on a creature. So, but what it can often also do is if you don't have a lot of creatures in play, it eats your commander. Right, your commander is the last thing to die, and if this dies, it also gives opponents an opportunity where if they don't like what you're doing, and you have just Abyssal Gatekeeper and your commander, they kill the Abyssal Gatekeeper, and they get your commander.
Mm-hmm.
I
For
don't know.
free.
Yeah, for free, or very easily. But the rest of them, I think, like if I were to only make like 2 changes, it'd probably be Abyssal Gatekeeper and Rottide Gargantua. Rottide Gargantua is a nice body, and I think when you're doing edict stuff, it still does the edict thing. And actually, a lot of people don't know with Rottide Garganta, exploit's optional. This can just be a 5/4. And I think that
Yep.
a lot of edict cards, some of the trouble you get with them sometimes is you get on a board state where you want to be pushing damage, and all the edict creature does is keep it all neutral. It doesn't add to your board. Rottide can. Rottide can just be a 5/4, right? Like, and that's nice. The problem with Raw Tide is that when you ETB and you have your exploit trigger on the stack, if somebody kills Raw Tide Gargantua, and then the ETB, the exploit, is on the stack, and you go to do it, if you exploit something, you don't get the edict. It's not there to see it. So what that means is
Mhm.
that a person who doesn't want to be edicted can turn a removal spell into a counter spell, and it's 5 mana. So like 5 mana could be a time walk, right? They like galvanic blast this thing, or I don't know, like vapor snag it, even like unsummon, right? Like all those are going to turn that edict off. So I don't like that. That said, like the number of decks that are
It's
Voltron
super rare.
as
It's super rare that does that. When that happens, though.
it is frustrating when it happens. So I think those are the only ones there. And then the cards that I would bring in is Spinning Darkness. Because as you can see here, we have Troll of Khazad-dûm, Twisted Abomination, Gloomfang Mauler. All of those cards mean that on turn 1 for Troll and turn 2 for Gloomfang and for Twisted, you can cycle them into the... actually, sorry, for Extract a Confession, pardon me. Extract a Confession, you can cycle them in and you can pay the whole collect evidence cost with these cycling creatures, which works really well with Spinning Darkness because Spinning Darkness is exactly 6 mana. So Spinning Darkness and Extract a Confession are best friends. So yeah. And this is a Plunder deck too. Plunder decks tend to work really well with Spinning Darkness. And I think Spinning Darkness is just gas. But you do see Lash of Malice in here, which is a card Clay and you and I have been talking about lately. There's no Defile, which I can see that he chose
It's
Lash
right
of
there.
Malice. Or sorry, not
It's right
Defile,
above
but
it.
Disfigure. I meant Disfigure.
Yeah.
He chose Lash of Malice over Disfigure, probably because he wants to give Death Rattle power to close the game out, which makes sense. Rotten Reunion's really good. This is a powerful card against all the Flicker stuff. But yeah, this is sweet. I like it. Like it a lot. Even got the Gangrenous Zombies, which is tight.
He put in some work. He in our game he played a Gangrenous Zombies, and I let him have it for a number of turns.
Oh, I bet.
Just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. One
Get
of
after
the
it.
one of the few black decks that actually needs to play Snowlands because of Gangrenous Zombies. He's even got that Soldevi Adnate, which is pretty cool, to be able to generate lots and lots of mana. You can actually, I think what you would do with this is you would sack your Death Rattle Oni. So if you needed to wipe the board again, you could sack Death Rattle Oni, cast something like a Psychotic Haze to ping everything, and then use that mana to recast the Death Rattle Oni to kill the big things.
Yep.
Which is pretty sweet because it's like this is kind of like a delve command, card or something, right? Where you have like a huge mana cost, but you don't actually pay it. You only pay 1. Another card I was thinking about that would be amazing here too is Kumbaj Witches. Is another really great card for this deck too. Just being able to repeatedly mow things down.
You know what? After the difficult time that I gave you the other day, I don't disagree with you on this list.
I think that Kumbaj Witches is a given how early we need to be interacting with things.
Yeah.
I think Kumbaj Witches is exactly where black decks need to be going right now. Being able to ping things for 1, or if nobody else has removal and they don't want to spend a card, you just say, I'll ping it for 1, and then I'll pick you, and then you ping it for 1, right? Also a way to close games. So very cool deck there. Let's see. We got to find our list here. Is it this one? Yeah. Had Tatiova with Bacon Master, played that. He's been working on Tatiova a lot lately. I think the word on the street there from him is that he may not be doing the Tidal Bore stuff anymore. Maybe just focusing on the Ghostly Flicker because of the haste problems that you get into. Basically, like, and most combo players are familiar with this. With your Gretchens and your Tidal Bore combos, and with Lore Weaver, Ley Weaver stuff is and Pilipala as well. Is that you have the haste problem. You can't activate it when it comes down. And so it gives a whole turn cycle for everybody to think about how scary you are and to kill your things and to put you in the dumpster. And it feels bad. So I think Ghostly Flicker doesn't require that, right? Same thing with Banishing that combo too, of course. But Ghostly Flicker combo doesn't require haste. You just play the creatures out. It's all based on ETBs. Beachbod was playing the Mystic Enforcer, which is the pro-black 5/5 flyer for 4 when you have Threshold on. That was interesting. And Brennan brought Killian, which for those of you watching, expect a Killian Let's Build. Maybe we'll even just do a coaching session. Brennan is one of my coaching clients, and we talked about deck lists quite a bit before he went into this. He ended up deciding to do none of the things we talked about. He had a deck that he wanted to play, and that was Killian. And we're going to be doing some really cool stuff with Killian, because Killian's gotten juiced lately. We got the Chains of Custody, we got the Make Your Move, which is really cool, being able to destroy when a card says target creature on it, but it also has another mode on it. It means that you still get the discount with Killian. So Make Your Move becomes like 1 mana, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or target creature with toughness 4 or greater, or maybe power 4 or greater. And then Chains of Custody giving the ward for 1 mana while also killing a card. So definitely a very cool deck here. Tithing Blade was a great addition to this deck too, because before we didn't want to play Fleshbag Marauder. Because if somebody killed the Fleshbag Marauder, then we'd have to sacrifice our Killian. So Tithing Blade, Extract a Confession, great cards for this deck, because you still want some way to use, you want access to Edicts.
And Tithing Blade is an artifact.
For plundering.
For cranial plating.
Oh yeah, for cranial. That's true. Yeah, I don't think he's playing, let's see, was he playing cranial? He was not playing cranial, which is fine, because traditionally Killian doesn't have a lot of artifacts, but there are good artifacts to put in Killian, like Wedding Invitation's really good.
From the time that I built it 2 years ago, there's definitely an increase in availability of artifacts.
Yeah, and Arkham Past
especially if you're on the plundering scheme, because you can add Wellspring to this.
Yeah. So we're going to be taking a look at like Killian when we do that video and about different ways to build it. But there's been a lot of really cool stuff, even innocuous stuff like Sugar Rush. You know, this like 1 black +3/+0 draw card is better than any of the other like targeted pump draw spells that we've had so far in a long time. Like Improvised Weaponry, these like really shit cards that we play in this deck because they cantrip and do something. Let's see, Scourge Mark is one of them. Yeah, Scourge Mark is just like 1 mana +1/+0 draw card. It kind of like, you know, but you still play them, right? Because they draw you a card very cheaply. And this deck does tend to have a harder time doing like the plunder game plan, right? Because you mostly want it to be like targeted stuff, and plundering requires like artifacts and things. So Slice from the Shadows, also a very cool card for this deck. This becomes -2/-2 uncounterable, because you get 2 discounted, right? So it's just 1 black. It's a disfigure, but uncounterable, and it scales. So you pay 2 for it, and you get -3/-3, which is pretty sweet. So definitely really cool. Definitely a sweet list. What else did we had? We had Ruin Crab. Clay, you and I were, you know, not the first ones to do Ruin Crab, but I think the first ones to treat it seriously in cPDH as a Ghostly Flicker deck that basically when you finally want to go in combo, you just Ghostly Flicker combo, and then you flicker a land with Ruin Crab in play, and you mill the whole table. It's like your win condition's built into your command zone, but it's also a 1/3 in the command zone that just blocks.
Right? 0/3, yeah.
Or sorry, 1 mana 0/3. Yeah, just blocks. Was he doing combo? He was definitely doing combo. Yeah. Cloud of Fairies, Peregrine Drake, Pneumatic Wall, Archaeomancer. Looks like Horseshoe Crab, which makes me think that there's a Freed from the Reel. Yep, there it is. So Freed from the Reel with Horseshoe Crab must be on some sort of Psionic Gift. Oh my god. Psionic Gift on Horseshoe Crab with Freed from the Reel, and you can do the thing. That's pretty funny. And then a boatload of interaction and draw spells. Just like a ton.
Neat.
So, yeah, that's kind of cool. We had Koss, also one of the patrons here, was doing Allura, Agent of Shadow Thieves. And we have actually been working on this deck in the Connoisseurs supporters only section of the Discord. And this deck looks really different from when he was playing it last. There's been some videos where he's been on the stream, and it's a lot like a Rilsa deck now, right? These cards are going to be really familiar to Rilsa players, like your sort of Fairy Seer, Cloudfin Raptor, Silver Raven, Slitherblade.
1 mana manipulate.
Yep. So this is
And
a
unblockable.
full-on ninjutsu deck, and the idea being that that when this allows you to pick up cards and reuse them that otherwise you would have to go through other hoops to do. So you can basically give like a Gary unblockable, hit somebody, and then return it to your hand. So you kind of have a form of ninjutsu in the command zone is kind of the idea. I think the conclusion that Koss came to, one of the conclusions was that it was rather slow. And I could totally see that, because returning creatures to your hand at end step and then having to pay the mana to replay them is rather slow. And ninjutsu in general too, ninjutsu is kind of slow because it's not tempo positive, right? Like you're replacing one creature in play with a creature in hand. So, but yeah, still very cool. He's playing a good amount of interaction here, a lot of bounce spells, a lot of counter spells. And then Allura, obviously grows with the Agent of Shadow Thieves, which is really nice. You just get this powerful beater in the command zone. Anything else that stuck out to you here that you thought was
Resident Hive Cryptid.
Oh God,
Wilson.
yeah, we got to talk about this one. Yeah, this Wilson Far Traveler shit is filthy.
They have put a tremendous amount of work.
Big shout out here.
Yeah.
This is super cool. So Wilson paired with Far Traveler. There's a lot of layers to why you pair these together, but the first and the I guess we could start with one thing. Wilson is a great commander for a background. And the reason being is that almost all the backgrounds have this thing that says commander creatures you own have. And what that means is that you can turn off the background by killing the commander. And that's really high value. Being able to just like take somebody off of their game plan completely by killing their commander. Wilson cannot be countered, and it has Ward 2. That is such a big step towards making sure that Far Traveler is on every fucking turn. Every turn. So Far Traveler can feel inconsistent when people can turn off your flickering, right? That feels bad. But with Wilson, a lot harder to do that. You're not going to be able to counter it for one thing, but you might be able to kill it. But man, Ward 2 can feel like Time Walk sometimes. Like Doomblade, pay 4 for it. Like how much mana do you actually have after that if it's like mid-game? Maybe like 2 mana, maybe. So the idea here is that we have a very resilient command zone that allows us to flicker creatures that have ETBs on them. And then we have ways to tap things. Another piece of this pie is that Wilson is a great attacker, which means that if nothing else happens, you have a way to tap a creature, because it has to be a creature. You have to one target tapped creature you control. So we have cards like Holdout Settlement, Survivor's Encampment that allow you to tap creatures. We play all the ramp creatures like Ceruli Caretaker, Loam Dryad, Jasper Sentinel, and Sentinel Stalwart. This has gotten juiced lately on tappers. And I think there's probably more, actually, now that I think about it. Aviary Mechanic, no.
Well, see if you can go to the original list and see if there's tags.
Yeah. It's such a disservice to the deck builder to look at a deck without tags.
Well, I don't think that's anybody in particular's fault. I think
no. I'm not saying it that way. I'm just saying like it's a disservice for us to look at it that way because okay. So they aren't using any tags in their deck. So we can actually go back here and take a look. But like the big bangers in this deck are Flickering Heliod's Pilgrim,
Ancestral Mask.
Yeah, you can get Ancestral Mask.
Grizzly.
You can get all the glitters. You can get Chains of Custody for removal. You can also get Reprobation. Cloak. You can get Armadillo Cloak. It's basically like a
Toolbox.
Selesnya Toolbox mid-range Voltron deck. And yes, it actually does deserve all of those archetypical designations, because if you ask Hive Cryptid about this deck, they will tell you it's kind of a lot of different things at the same time. And I would agree. Um, you know, even the interactive suite,
Ooh,
like Chomanos and Benevolent Blessing can
hey,
both go on your opponent's creatures.
look at that flywheel racer.
Flywheel Racer, another. Oh yeah, yeah. This is another one of like the few homes for this card, right? I play this one in TPI. Actually, one of the best homes for Flywheel Racer is TPI, this deck, and then gut decks. Turn 2, Flywheel Racer. Turn 3, gut. Tap the gut, animate the racer, attack, and then sacrifice the thing you played on 1. So it's basically like a mana rock that's also a good attacker, that also ramps you. So, but yeah, very cool card. Very weird. I will say the sequencing on this card will fuck your brain up, because you'll be like, second main, realize you haven't used your mana. There is always the possibility if somebody kills it in combat that you don't get the mana in your second main. But it's a weird card. It's like you attack, you have to animate it to make it into a creature. You kind of want to attack with it, and then second main you can tap it to make mana. So, or during your combat. But yeah, this one, Springleaf Drum, both other ways to tap things. This is a very cool deck. And like just generically, if we think about Selesnya, some of the problems it has, if you aren't in enchantments in Selesnya, you have a problem with keeping parity on cards. You run out of cards. There's a couple of examples where like disgusting Selesnya decks, like Satyr Enchanter, where it's just like, Satyr Enchanter is so good because Selesnya is so good if you can solve the card problem. If you can draw cards, it's really good. And that's what Far Traveler does. Flicker, Thraben Inspector to draw cards, Spirited Companion.
Oh yeah, and there's no shortage of drawing that additional card per turn.
Yeah.
But speaking of Selesnya, because your old man is getting perishable.
Yeah.
Go back to the main list.
Oh, back to here? Yeah.
Yep. And go down to the left-hand side right there, Mystic Enforcer.
Yes.
So Adam, maybe a little unjustly, was getting criticized for his 27 lands. I don't think I've ever seen this dude play this list and not have the mana. He
always hits his land drops.
So something about the synergies of what he's doing and recurring, between the green spells that mill and bring a land back, or something like that.
Very
he's always hitting his. So
Abundant Harvest is a great example. We've talked about this. I'd say that publicly, I think we're the ones that kind of coined this concept that any green deck can swap a land for Abundant Harvest. And the beauty of it is you will always find a land off of it if you want. So it's always going to find you a land. Now, it's not going to be the exact land you were looking for necessarily, but it will be a land. Whereas Ash Barrens, for example, which is a great comparison to this, Ash Barrens will find you whatever basic you want. But Abundant Harvest late game, you just say, I want to draw a card, and you just get something else, right? And then I think the way that he has...
Look at that.
Generous and Eagles. So 29.
Yeah, look at the number of enchantments that he's playing.
Yeah,
17. And then take a look at the quality of those enchantments, what they are. They're mostly removal / protection / pants.
Highly interactive stuff. He did a spirit link on my pinger. He put it on my Unruly Catapult, and it was basically like killing it. I didn't activate it at all because it would have gained him 2 life every ping. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to gain him all this life. So I didn't do that. But yeah, Spirit Link can work that way. Guilty Conscience, another one. You got your like Journey to Nowhere. Chomanos and Benevolent Blessing can be used on your opponent's creatures too to stop combos like Freed from the Real or a Type Changer or a Flicker. Righteous Aura, also pretty cool. This can be used to interrupt certain pinger combos. Pay 2 life, turn off pinging. So if you had somebody try to start their Malcolm combo and the artifacts come in, you get the trigger, you pay the 2 life, you turn off that instance of damage. If they don't have another artifact to come into play, right, then they're not going to go infinite. because they're not doing the damage.
In a 1v1. So your Peregrine Strombull is probably your
Oh yeah, it would have to.
best
Well,
example.
no, it prevents. Oh, to you, you're right. Oh, so this would only work in the 1v1 because it deals damage to the other people.
Well, so Peregrine Strongbull has a
Oh,
is the
Pendragon.
only pin whatever has is the only pinger that has trouble closing out the game once you get down to below 3 players.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
being that
because
it
you
is
make 2 treasures, you have 1 mana for the activation. Oh, okay, so if you have 2 players in play, just 2 players, so you and someone else, then the Pendragon Strongbowl is, well, it still does it, right? It's just it's infinite. 1 damage, makes a treasure, spend the mana. Oh no, because you have to sack a treasure. So you need
yeah.
it only works with 4 players in the pod or 3 players in the pod, but not 2. Oh, interesting. Yeah, because you have to spend 1 to sack the other treasure.
I was
Okay.
trying to look it up so I could see the
Yeah.
wording. Yeah.
He's also on Ward of Lights, which is great. I like seeing this card in these decks. Ward of Lights is another flash aura that grants protection from a color. If you cast it with flash, you sack it at the end step, but it grants protection as an aura. So you can use this on your own stuff to protect things at instant speed. If everybody's tapped out and you want protection, you can cast it at sorcery speed and it just sticks, right? You can also cast it with flash to put it on somebody else's thing to stop them from flickering, type changing, freed from the reeling, banishing, knacking, right? There's a lot of cool stuff you can do. And if you play core Skyfisher, stockpiling, celebrant type stuff, you can always pick this up and reuse it again, which is very cool. So that's a good one. But yeah, this is a cool deck. A lot of really interesting stuff. He's on a strong self-mill plan. So there's like other cards that he's doing here are like, where was it? Wasteful Harvest. Mill 5. This is like a 3 mana dig 5, draw 1.
Yeah.
Season of
So
Renewal.
I mean, I thought since we were talking about Selesnya, like he is somewhat limited to the single draw per turn on
Right.
here, but by and large, the deck seemed to function and do the damn thing.
Yeah, and it's a 6/6 too, so you're gonna get like a 2 or a 3 shot kill with Voltron damage. You've even got the like Tragic Poet to like pick up the enchantments out of the graveyard, which is cool. There's a couple of those that you can play in these decks. But yeah, Selesnya building around enchantments is always a good way to go. Even here, Stave Off, Mana Tithe, Awestrike, Vines of Vastwood has the Moments Piece to use from the graveyard. Tangle. There's a lot of very like interesting cards in this list here. Even Invigorate, which is great because if you kill someone with commander damage, life gain doesn't matter. Which is pretty sweet. Definitely something to keep in mind if you're on Selesnya and you're doing Voltron stuff, that Invigorate is still a card you can play. So
be wary of those edicts, though.
Yeah, this is definitely a deck that's going to suffer to edicts. You only really have 9 creatures. But so it's kind of funny because you've got pro black, which is good against black decks, but then the lack of creatures is probably makes it kind of weak to them at the same time because they tend to have a lot of those mass edicts. So yeah, that's a cool one. Think that there were a lot of Abdel players. There was we had 3. Is that 3? Yeah, and we had an Aranus Street Urchin player. Yeah, and Lobert on his Sphinx Summoner as always. Lobert loves the Sphinx Summoner. I love it too. It's just like one of the nastier cranial plating decks in the format because it's just killing Sphinx Summoner feels like giving your opponent more combo creatures because every time they replay it, it finds another combo creature. But when you put it on the Sphinx, he's going to 2-shot you or 1-shot you, one of the two. So very cool card. Great deck for plundering too. You can see he's really benefiting from Perilous Research and all the black plunder cards. He's even using cards like Candy Grapple and Final Flourish for the removal plunder, which can turn your removal spells into draw spells when you have rocks in play that you want to sacrifice. So that's definitely pretty spicy. So another great Dimir deck here. But yeah, so Clay, I'm gonna let you go here. I can see the tired in your eyes is starting to hit here.
Yeah,
it is arrived. It has arrived, but.
Plus, I haven't eaten yet.
Oh, well, my dude, you need to go get yourself some din din. But I am just gonna keep going for a little bit longer here. Want to cover a couple more things, but
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, dude, thank you for joining us today. It's great to have two excellent chats with you today or this
Hmm.
week. Talking about our favorite topics, cPDH. It's wonderful as always, and I'm very excited about your Sir Conrad deck and see where this goes. This is very
Well,
atypical and it's
we're gonna
exciting.
set it down for a little bit and work on some other things. My main goal with my deck building moving forward is I want to get myself a stable of like maybe 3 decks, each one of those decks having a different game plan that particularly preys on different types of metas, where it's either a fair meta or a fast combo meta or something like that. The reason why is because I want to be able to provide some analysis on whatever meta is happening
Yeah,
at the time, and then bring that deck, because for the last year I've been announcing what I'm going to be playing,
sure.
and I'm not saying that was the main contributor to my performance, but like if everybody knows what you're playing, you
Yeah,
know.
although it's interesting in my case, I don't think there was any question about what I was going to play the last like
Mm.
many tournaments, right? But so it depends, and you're only one player too, right? There's a lot of other players out there that you've got to like
Mhm.
prepare for.
Well, I mean,
But
what I'm saying is like I was expecting you to play TPI,
yeah,
and my version of Conrad was leaning into you playing TPI. So
it's
that's
a
that's
harsh
ex-
deck for me. Yeah,
so that's so that's what I'm talking about.
yeah,
Like, I want to take away some piece of known information. It'll give me a little freedom too, because I've been kind of locked into this Conrad deck for the last couple
yep,
of months.
yeah.
So
Time to
being
switch it
able to
up and get a breath of fresh air. It's
be free.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think it's always wise too, especially like in my case with Third Path. Like I'm probably going to make some adjustments to it, and then I may take a break from it for a little bit too. I think just like it's wise to like
perspective.
give your deck a little break. Also give yourself a little break from whatever you were doing before and to do something different. And also like if
Hmm.
you kind of run the same deck every single time, especially if you do well with it, right?
Hmm.
You may invite a little more negative attention that you want. And I mean, presence of 3 Abdel decks at the tournament was an excellent read from Alcadron. Dry spell against an Abdel player.
Well, Abdel,
Like,
speaking of which, I didn't realize exactly. I had a pod, my first pod had 2 Abdel players in
oh
it.
wow,
In fact, it was Hive in the first seat, me in the second seat, Abdel Red in third, and
Abdel Red.
Kunks in the fourth seat. And because the 2 Abdel decks are just naturally slow, it took away all the bite from my edicts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Because
yeah,
Hive was not stopping. They were just like, okay, creature, flicker, engine, blah blah. Just like, okay, and it's like, all right, I gotta start, leveraging my spells, and it just took away the efficacy of what I was doing, because I was only doing it to one player.
yeah. That makes sense. And edicts are pretty terrible against Abdel. That is one of the
Mm.
reasons why I shied away from black on this time to go around. The funny thing though is that while your edicts are bad against Abdel, you also have the best sweepers in the format, or some of the best sweepers in the format. So
Mm.
to say that like playing black because of Abdel wouldn't be good is
What?
not accurate, right?
Well, so let's conceptualize that.
Because you
So I
sweep up all
have
the creatures and then you edict the
uh,
Abdel.
no. Well, think about this.
Hmm.
I have the best sweepers in the format. Now, by under what conditions am I able to sweep the Abdel? Only after they've engaged in some flicker loops and they've
After they've done their
established,
thing.
after they've done their thing. So like you get into this weird balance of like, okay, is this the first value flicker that's trying to get some blockers,
Oh, I don't
or are
know.
they
I,
or have they already established an engine, and basically they're getting the flicker to the
yeah.
graveyard so they can cast. So like the timing of the sweepers for the against the Abdel players is just awkward
Well, it's
because
necessary it is awkward and it's necessary, because once they have, like in the game I played, it was like turn 5, I want to say, they had 12 tokens in play. Well, we have to deal with that now, right? And if we want to punch them, then the tokens have got to go. So that's where the sweepers come up, and they clean up shop on that, and they can definitely do some good work there. But you're right, it is awkward because it's like after the fact. So you really, when you're playing black, you need to be really thinking about exactly what answers you have to Abdel. Your Vendetta, your Ghastly Demise are both good. Defile, Snuff Out, of course. Spinning Darkness doesn't do it. Defiled, or and Disfigure and Lash of Malice don't do it, but all the 2-mana ones do too. Victim of Night, Grasp of Darkness, Doomblade, Terror. There's a whole bunch of other ones there too that work as well. But you're right. Doing it after the fact feels pretty bad. I mean, it can do good work and it can help the table for sure. But yeah,
so you
best
usually
place
have
to interact is counter it or kill it on the stack first time.
You have to combine those two things. So like you play your 3-mana sweeper, leaving 2 mana up to kill the Abdel and the inevitable flicker. So you have to double up on your spells. But I mean, just the way that it is.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing to keep in mind there is with the Abdels, and I've seen some conversation about that today, and actually yesterday as well in the Common Connoisseurs and over in the Sanctuary, about Abdel, is that if you see somebody cast an Abdel and they're flickering like a Mana Rock, an Astrolabe, and a Thraben Inspector, okay, that seems like a pretty fair selection of things. That does not warrant me dealing with them right away. When you're in my game, where they had Network Terminal, Felwar Stone, some other 2-mana rock, I can't remember what it was, and then I can't remember what the other card they had that they were flickering, but there was one other thing, making 4 tokens every turn, but also on 3 rocks, right? 3 mana. That's a totally different story, right? Kill that thing right on the stack, like get it done, because the snowball can happen very, very quickly, and it's not so much that it's not so much that whether it kills you or not. It's can you actually deal with them after they've done it? And that's part of the problem with Abdel when they start going off, is that they might not kill everyone, but they might make it functionally impossible to be killed. And if you're a combo deck and an Abdel player is doing that and they come away with 12 tokens and you don't have any blockers, well, maybe you start getting beaten down by a horde of little 1/1 soldier tokens,
Okay. So before I go, this deck that he's about to talk about, they had first day of class combo. Basically, they made a bunch of tokens and they cast first day of combo or first day of class.
First day of combo is cool.
Yeah, they cast that at the very end, and then they went to go flicker their Abdel, and then basically exile all the 20-something tokens that they had made, meaning that they were going to re-enter the battlefield now
as 2/2s.
Well, no, just as combat, because they gain haste in the 2/2s.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I killed this player on the stack, with the help of another player, basically Conrading them to death. So
holy crap, this is spooky. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about this. But dude, Clay, thank you so much. Appreciate you. And for those of you watching, make sure to go and support Clay's content here. Yeah, if you go catch the interview here, we had a great chat actually, Clay and I, about the series, the Sanctuary Open, about the deck choice, some other things like that. It was really good. So make sure to go check that out. Go to subscribe, support this. This is kind of the home for cpdh.guide, which of course is the YouTube channel to the accompanying website where you can get all of your metadata, commander data, resource needs for cPDH. And it's a great thing to just have in your back pocket. So with that said, Clay, we'll catch you on the flip side, man. Thank you so much.
All right. I'm going to vaporize myself into outer space. All right. So there's one.
And
leave. Yeah.
There he goes.
And we'll see you guys later. Peace out.
Peace out, buddy. See ya. All right. So for those of you still here, we're going to take a look at this red-white Abdel deck that was being played with Street Urchin. This is a pretty interesting way to leverage Abdel. We're saying kind of we're a Boros deck that can generate value and draw cards with our flickering. We have combos involving First Day of Class, as well as Journey to Nowhere and Oblivion Ring, as well as Ardent Elementalist as well. Probably like Cloud Shift, Ardent Elementalist with Abdel and a bunch of rocks in play. And then we also have removal in the command zone, which is pretty nice. Being able to convert our random creatures and artifacts to pings is definitely strong. And then, of course, the ability to go Witty Roastmaster, Impact Tremors, something along those lines, and then flicker it, flicker and then target your 1/1s. The 1/1s leave, and then you make new ones for all the ones you know. So normally, like with Abdel, you wouldn't target your 1/1s as well, unless you wanted to like attack, flicker your Abdel, and then basically give them vigilance by making them all leave play, and then you're going to get a token for everything you exiled. For each permanent exiled this way. So they're exiled. They might not come back, but you create them again. So something like Impact Tremors and Witty Roastmaster can really do a ton of damage with that. I'm actually quite curious to see here if there's any other like go wide sort of payoffs. Yeah, Knight of Old Benalia, to be able to give your creatures +1/+1 on a flicker is nice. Wildfire Elemental whenever an opponent is dealt non-combat damage. So if you have a pinger in play, or if you have Street Urchin, right, then the Wildfire Elemental can basically, if you were to flicker all of your stuff, and maybe you flicker a couple of your tokens, and you have a Witty Roastmaster and Impact Tremors, it's going to deal damage for each one of those, but it's also going to give you +1/+1 to your whole board with the Wildfire Elemental. But this also pairs well with the Street Urchin. You could throw a couple of things at opponents and give a big buff to your team, because it's non-combat damage. Dew says, I love how much unsolved this format is, and it's a brewer's paradise. It really is, yeah. Like, I think people have been talking about all the different builds of Abdel quite a lot for some time, since Abdel was kind of identified as a very broken commander. And I think that mainly people wanted to focus on what they knew was going to be good, which was blue-white. And then slowly we had black-white coming into the picture, and now we're seeing the other ones, like Boros, which always struck me as really good. Like, there's a lot of other cards you could play here, like Volatile Claws to protect your board from Dragon's Breath and or Breath Weapon and Fiery Cannonade, while also giving +2/+0 to your board. There's stuff like Guardian's Pledge, which can give +2/+2 instant speed for 3 mana to just kill people with anthems, right? So you're like a mid-range combo control deck all at the same time, right? Like, this is your control. This is your defensive capabilities, but it's also your aggressive capabilities. You can just make a lot of 1/1s and nuke people with it. And then your combo is you've got your Oblivion Ring plus Journey to Nowhere. I think there should be a... where's that creature? It's a 4-mana creature. Maybe they aren't playing it here. The Tiefling Warrior. I can't remember what it's called. But that one is sometimes included in the combos. It basically, flickers something when it enters the battlefield, which is normally a pretty awkward card, but in this deck it's actually very sweet. And then you've got your Ardent Elementalist and Cloud Shift, which is kind of a scary number of boxes to check for any given deck. But this one's definitely doing that. It does look like it comes at the cost of removal outside of the command zone. So if you don't have your Abdel, you can't Street Urchin, and Abdel is often a target for removal. So if Abdel is dying, you don't have Street Urchin, which means your deck functionally only has like a couple of answers to things without your commander. And it's very common to like counter or kill Abdel on the stack, and so there is some like top heaviness to this, where like Abdel is scary, so people stop it. And when they stop it, it's also turning off Street Urchin, right? Subsequent casts of your commander aren't going to have as much stuff to work with there. We also have Biblioplex Assistant, which I forgot to mention as well. So if you have Biblioplex Assistant with an Energy Refractor and you flicker Abdel, then you're putting a card instant or sorcery your Cloud Shift on top, and then drawing it with the Energy Refractor. So it's a build your own Ardent Elementalist as well. Icewind Stalwart, that's the one, do. Thank you. Yeah, so I don't see that here. Looks like that might be a good addition to the deck if they wanted to. But either way, pretty low land count. But 30, let's see, how many of these are mana rocks? These are all ramps. So 14 sources of ramp. Some of them are very cheap, like your Wayfarer's Bauble and Springleaf Drum. Springleaf Drum looks really good here. A little bit low on the lands, I would say, just because you're not a deck full of cantrips. Like TPI, we play 32 total land sources, but we have like a zillion ways to draw cards on 1 mana and a ton of really effective card selection. We don't have the same thing here. So I think if I were to be approaching this deck, the two major changes is they should definitely also have Eagles of the North in here, because Eagles of the North, if you flicker it, gives the bonus +1/+0 and first strike, while also being a land cycler and also something you can reanimate. And then Oliphant is the other one. And I think in a deck like this, Oliphant makes a lot of sense, being able to make Abdel a 6-power trampler, but also just like, it's just a creature that you can cast when you don't want lands anymore, which is just really good. So I think those are 2 cards that I would probably add here, but I love the initiative stuff too. This is a good deck for holding the initiative if you manage to get your claws on it. You can flicker your Trailblazer's Torch, your Stirring Bard. I'm noticing here that they don't have the other initiative creature, the Goliath Paladin, which is perhaps an intentional choice, perhaps not. Let's see. It says here under creatures, draw Union of the Third Path. No. Oh, so they did have Icewind Stalwart in here, actually, but they cut it. They cut Late to Dinner as well. That's a card that I usually would really like here, being able to get things back. They have Goliath Paladin under value. Yeah. So it looks like those were cuts for other more important things. Okay. So yeah, cool strategy there. Cool deck. Let's see. We got to go back to here. And then we had a Cartel Aristocrat, which very interesting, by Ominous, or Ominous, I guess is the other way to pronounce that. Let's take a look and see what we have here. This looks like we might be dealing with a Spice Lord here. So artifacts, arcane signets, okay, kite sail. So this is kind of, is this supposed to be Voltron? No, it's not. This is doing a lot of like the really cheap stuff that makes another body, along with Grave Flickers. So you've got a sack outlet in the command zone. You can like cast your, oh, they actually don't have any of the big payoffs like Gary or anything. Because I was thinking when you have a sack outlet in the command zone, you can always go Undying Evil on Gary, sack it, it comes back, retrigger the ETB. I wonder what the strategy of this deck is, like what the game plan is. Ominous, if you're seeing this later on, let us know in the comments below after you've watched the video what you think or what the strategy was here. But you're seeing a lot of like the resurrection stuff, like Unearth. We're not seeing some of the other ones like Recommission and Return Triumphant, while we do see Late to Dinner and Resurrection. I think this player may not be aware of the fact that there's a Breath of Life and False Defeat, which are just strictly better than Resurrection because they don't cost double white. Nice deck for Dread Return, although the number of creatures we would bring back is a little bit lower. It's Gloomfang Mauler. So there's kind of a reanimation plan here. Oh, Gary is here. It's just not organized by mana. So Gary, Gloomfang Mauler, Pegasus Guardian, maybe the Moodmark Painter and the Troll as things to bring back. Some graveyard value stuff. Definitely interesting. Let's go back to here. And let's make sure we cover any of these last ones that I missed. We had Puzzle Box on Malcolm Breaches, which is very cool deck. I really like this approach to doing Malcolm stuff. Malcolm combo deck that has kind of a curiosity control angle to it, where we've got a lot of removal, a lot of counter spells, 7 counter spells, 15 pieces of removal, all the pingers. So similar to TPI, where we're benefiting from everything except for the creature ones. So we're not doing Witty Roastmaster, we're not doing Impact Tremors, but instead we're doing Blister Spit Gremlin and Pendragon Strongbowl, which are also combo. They can do combo stuff. We've got the Krark Clan Shaman here, which is a cool one. Definitely seems like a strong card right now, especially because in this deck you don't kill your command zone, which is nice. Doesn't actually even hit Malcolm, doesn't kill breaches. Yeah, and then you've got your Ophidian Eye Tandem Lookout on the pingers to draw a lot of cards. If you can change them into a pirate, then you start doing some pretty insane stuff. Every single ping is going to make 3 treasures for the 3 players, and it's going to exile 3 cards off of the top of everyone's library that you will be able to cast, which is pretty spicy. So 35 lands with the Lorien revealed, so that's actually higher than I would have expected. But this deck is not running like a plurality of cheap cantrips. You do have Consider, Probe, Ponder, Preordain, but just a few. Yeah, this seems a couple of ramp spells. Just looks like a good mid-range deck, Nice balance of different effects. We've also got the Candlekeep Sage, which is a card that is pretty busted in the right home. Looks like in this one it's probably just for value, just to be able to draw cards when people interact with your commander. Puzzle Box is definitely a good deck builder, so this is a pretty cool one. And with that, that's all we got from this particular series. So the matchups, I wanted to talk a little bit about this earlier, but Clay and I got on a roll talking about some of the cool decks and some of the choices for Third Path Iconoclast and for Conrad and all that. But I want to tell you guys a little bit about the matchups that I had. First game was Gretchen in position 1, myself in position 2, Killian, and then Dargo Keskett. And this one, the Gretchen player tried to go off. This was EB Shine. Tried to go off once, and didn't happen. And then Killian and Dargo were kind of hitting each other. And what's up, Papoosh? Good to see you. Thank you. Appreciate the GGs. And then I got into a 1v1 with Killian in the end, and ultimately just sort of just pushed through at the end by countering his stuff. And the 1v1 for TPI is really, really good. When you get into a 1v1, it tends to be strong because we have both removal and counter spells, so we can protect our things, we can stop theirs, we can kill theirs. We have a swarm of 1/1s, so generally speaking, in a 1v1, we'll end the game by swinging all of our 1/1s in and then, do the rest of the burn damage. So even if only half of the 1/1s connect, it's the damage we need to end the game. So that was cool. The Dargo Keskett player did some strong stuff, but their Dargos sort of repeatedly kept in check. Game 2, Gretchen position 1, Abdel Throne in position 2. I was in position 3, and Zada position 4. This one was a little bit weird. The Gretchen and the Zada players had pretty dysfunctional games. The Abdel, Agent of the Iron Throne player, went pretty bananas on like turn 5, I want to say, and this was Yami. Threatened to discard all of our cards with a Hopeless Nightmare, and which was scary. I countered that, but then they proceeded to flicker 3 times. They made 12 tokens, and they kind of made themselves into archenemy. They got knocked out, but the cool thing was that there was a really interesting interaction where the Abdel Throne player was very low on life, and they had Agent of the Iron Throne in play. And everybody else was sort of like not that high life totals either. And so I realized if I just suicided my 1/1s into him to threaten to kill him, he would have to block. And that when he blocked all of his 1/1s dying to my 1/1s, would then ping everybody else. So by threatening him, this is a very cool game. By threatening him with death, he ended up killing the other players or taking them very low, and then I just burned the table out with a series of draw spells and burn spells. It's a very, very fun game, very interesting. I thought I was in a bad position. The Zada player, Stein, never really got off the ground, never cast Zada, unfortunately. The discard hurt them, but they also just didn't hit their land sources in time. It was just, I think, kind of an awkward draw. So I kind of just ran the table with that interaction. And plus, with Gretchen and Abdel there, the dynamic that played out is that there's two very dangerous combo players, both doing very scary things, and I'm the mid-range player generating value, pressuring them, and building up a board. I just didn't necessitate interaction. Like it just didn't make sense. And that's sometimes that's really where TPI is positioned best, is when you have combo players at the table, you're doing powerful things, you're drawing cards, you're interacting, you're justifying your position at the table with your interaction. But ultimately, what you do isn't going to immediately end the game for all the players in play. It's only, around that turn 8, turn 10 that we start to take over the game. But by that time, a lot of times it's, we're in a firm position. We've got a lot of resources and things. So we're positioning ourselves to fit into that gap there. And that worked really, really well in this game in particular. And that was a turn 6 win. This is one of the fastest wins I think I've ever had with TPI. The Abdel player drained the table for 8 with their Throne of the Dead, with their Agent of the Iron Throne. And then my pings just cleaned up the rest. So that's about as fast as it gets. TPI will never be winning games on turn 6 when you're playing mid-range under any other circumstance, except for maybe if a loyal subordinate's going to work, or if there's another pinger at the table, right? Then sometimes that double pinging will take people low quickly. Third game, I was in position 1, Mystic Enforcer, Sir Conrad, Wilson Far Traveler. I won that game on turn 10. This is a terrible game for me. I had a very dysfunctional start. I kept a fine hand, but it just didn't draw lands. It wasn't really doing anything for a long time. My commander got killed on turn 2. So turn 6 was the start of my game, basically. And I managed to win because my deck, after shafting me for the first half of the game, showed up in the second half, and I was able to chain Shared Discoveries into Of One Mines, into Treasure Cruise, and basically had 4 pingers in play that I drew off of all these cards, and was able to soak damage off of the Wilson Far Traveler. Basically digging through my deck killed the Conrad player and the Mystic Enforcer player, so Aaron and Adam, killed them on accident. And then the Wilson player, which was Resident Hive Cryptid, had an 11/11 Wilson and 8 or 9 damage on me, I want to say. And I was at 9 and he was at 27. And I just chained draw spells, survived his next attack, countered his All That Glitters, and then just burned him out, which was it was a pretty impressive showing for the deck, because I had no answer to the Wilson. I had no answer to the fact that he had the Soul Sisters that were in play the whole game, but it was wild. Adam, the Mystic Enforcer player, had Righteous Aura, which was protecting him from the Wilson, and so he didn't have any trouble or have any issue with Wilson being in play because he could always stop it. And so basically I was the punching bag for those things. And Aaron took a lot of hits as well from Wilson and from the other players. But it was kind of a miraculous finish on that one. And then the last game, the finals, and I didn't play my 4th game. We just took a draw. Let's see, what was it? No, I conceded to Ankh. Because basically the outcome of that game didn't matter. I was already placed in the top 4. Puzzle Box wasn't going to place at all. His standings wouldn't allow, basically, even if he won, it wouldn't have gotten into the finals. And then our 4th didn't show up because I think they thought the tournament was over, which is totally understandable. I don't think they thought that they made it into the next round, but it was Swiss. So, and so we just conceded to Ankh, which got him into the finals, which was great. And then in the finals, I was position 1, Gretchen position 2, Malcolm Kedis position 3, and Conrad position 4. And this was wild. Gretchen had a very slow game. Malcolm had a normal speed game, I would say, the Malcolm Kedis, but he attacked the Gretchen and they fought over whether a Gaia's gift would resolve on a Trinket Mage so that the Trinket Mage could block with reach on the Malcolm and kill it. And there was a pretty disastrous stack interaction there that led to them spending a lot of resources on each other. Turn 3, I got oublieted by the Conrad player, which basically like I was able to resolve a gutter snipe. So basically I was just playing with like a gutter snipe and then just like a pile of red blue cards that didn't do anything other than what they did. So I wasn't really making any tokens. But I managed to dig deep and find myself a Moon Snare prototype, which I was able to use to bounce the oubliette at end step. Untapped, did a few things, but mainly kept my mana open because I was concerned about other players at the table, particularly the Gretchen player or the Malcolm player, helping the oubliette resolve again. And that's exactly what happened. The Gretchen player passed the turn, no game actions, played a land, I think. The Malcolm player played a combo creature, and then the Conrad player cast the oubliette on my TPI again. And this time I went, I think it was like counterspell into negate, and they countered both of them. And then I went as a desperation thing. I cracked Aether Spellbomb to try and return TPI to my hand with the oubliette on the stack. And then they cast Vines of Vastwood, which stopped the Aether Spellbomb, but also made the TPI impossible to target with the oubliette. So instead they took my gutter snipe. So that was a huge turning point in the game, and that's from there I was able to stitch together a win by burning everybody out on turn 10. So my wins were turn 10, turn 6, turn 10, turn 10. And when we look at the average, number of turns, we can actually go to cpdh.guide and go to the metadata here. Average game of cpdh is ending on turn 9, plus or minus 2 turns, a standard deviation of 2. So if we look here, the actually looks like late. It's actually probably let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's probably like 8.8 or 8.7. I want to say. So yeah, something like that, about 8 point something. Your highest density of wins coming in at turn 8, turn 9, and turn 10. So TPI, I think squarely falls in that turn 9 game for winning the game, which is great. Definitely like in the running for that, helping to pull these mid-range numbers up because I love mid-range. That's all I want to do. So yeah, that was the kind of the report from the tournament. Yeah, that's about it here. I think we're going to wrap things up, and before we do, I want to share with you guys some of the projects that I've got coming up here for future videos, just to kind of tantalize your brains on some exciting new stuff coming, and tell you about what we're going to be building. So there's going to be work done on Killian, Ink Duelist. We looked at the list that Brennan played during the tournament earlier today. Dina Soulsteeper, which is going to be a Life Gains Matter deck, kind of similar to Witherbloom Apprentice, but different in a lot of ways. Basically just another pinger deck, but Golgari this time, which is super cool. That's really unusual, like a Golgari pinger deck, or like Golgari Spellslinger, which is what Witherbloom is. I love that about cPDH, how you get all these really unusual things to play or to build around, right? That you wouldn't be able to play in other formats. Like name a cEDH deck that's like a Golgari Spellslinger deck. It's just not there. I have some thoughts about how to do Witherbloom Apprentice different. How do we make normal Witherbloom Apprentice appealing again? And one of the core interactions that I'm really interested in focusing on with Witherbloom Apprentice is, let's go to Dalek here because I know that there's a bunch of these there. Witherbloom Apprentice has not benefited from any of the new draw spells that are making black really good. Plundering in black is the most efficient card advantage we've ever had. Village Rites, Corrupted Conviction, Deadly Dispute, Reckoner's Bargain, Fanatical Offering, Rowan's Grim Search. All these cards are just like exceptionally good for black because they pair together with cards that also draw you cards when they die or when they leave the play. They're also flexible for creatures. And I think that that's where Witherbloom Apprentice is, you've got to play instants and sorceries to really benefit from the commander. But I had an aha moment, and that is to get access to the plunder, we need to play creatures. But we don't want to play creatures that don't come on instants and sorceries. But what if the creature's ETB and drained anyways? Isn't that functionally the same? We can either play an instant or a sorcery that creates a creature and get the drain trigger for it, or we can just cast a creature that has a drain trigger on it and then include the plunders. So I'm going to be looking at cards like Okiba Reckoner Raid, Serrated Scorpion, your Arrogant Outlaw and Etched Familiar. Probably not Arrogant Outlaw because you have to, somebody lost life this turn. You might be able to do that one. Etched Familiar, Nocturnal Feeder, Parasitic Impetus, stuff like that. Vampire Spawn. And, then we'll be able to play the Grave Flickers, play the Plunders, get some better card advantage because Witherbloom Apprentice having like a pile of 3-mana draw 2s that lose us life kind of sucks. It hasn't withstood the test of time in the way that I'd like it to. So we're going to be talking about that at some point. And then also, as we alluded to in the conversation with Clay, we're going to be talking about my approach to Sir Conrad, which Clay is focused on kind of what he does to himself, a lot of self-mill causing our triggers, and then using things in our graveyard to our advantage. I'm going to focus on kind of a bit more of like the traditional black good stuff and focusing on what we do to others. So, Conrad says whenever something goes to a graveyard, well, sweepers and edicts are a great way to trigger Conrad, and black does that really great. So we're going to explore how to do that as well, a little bit less on the self-mill and more on just like playing a good black mid-range deck, probably some rocks, probably some nice rituals like the Bubbling Muck, which I've been playing a lot of lately. So yeah, there we go. Killian, Dina, Witherbloom Apprentice update, and Sir Conrad coming down the pipe. I think there was one other here, if I can pull this up. Let me see, under supporter comments here. Make sure I don't forget it. Oh yeah. I think we're going to return to Tor Wauki the Younger, also known as Young Tor. I like to call him Young Tor. I think Tor Wauki works really, really well with pingers. And to get the most out of the pinger suite, we need to play creature tokens. And to get the best out of black, we need to have things to sacrifice. So you can kind of see how this ties together. Instants and sorceries that make bodies that trigger Tor, bodies that we can block with, attack with, and sacrifice to plunder, unlocking access to impact tremors, and a witty roastmaster on top of the other pingers that we have. So integrating that plunder win condition into Young Tor, because I think that Young Tor is a very strong commander. It is 5 mana. It doesn't have an ETB. It dies to a lot of things still. It is a black commander, but I think it's 3 toughness. So, but it gains life, has repeat removal in the command zone. Rakdos is just very sick. And I think it's definitely something we want to be looking into. So that's kind of our schedule coming up here for the connoisseurs. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But with that, we're going to wrap things up here. If you all enjoyed the content today, do make sure to leave a like. If after the video is over, leaving a comment for the algorithm is really helpful to put this video in the hands of more people who may not know about or may never have played cPDH or PDH at all. And it's a great way to get more people into the format. The more people see this, the more the format grows. So yeah, make sure to do that. That's the free thing to do. And if you want to take your support a step further, you can always go to patreon.com/common connoisseurs. The link is in the description below, and you can start supporting the channel financially for as little as $2 a month. It's like half the cost of a cup of coffee to join and get access to the supporters section of the Discord, as well as updates to all the decks. So as you can see here, there's 403 decks in my Mox field. Of these here, these 45, this number is growing. This is the number of decks that I have fully updated and tuned that I'm actually like maintaining. And if you want updates on those, I tag everybody every time we make an update to a deck, and I show what we put in, what we took out, and what the rationale was for it. So if you want updates on all those things for a really small amount of money, you can get into the supporter section of the Discord and check that out. There's great conversations, great decks going on in there. And yeah, so with that, too much ado, thank you so much for being here this whole time. A very enlightening tourney wrap. I'm glad you found this this useful. For those of you out there who are looking to find a new deck, make sure to go out and check out that TPI stuff. Oh, that's the other thing. Two new versions of TPI. That's the other thing I wanted to spoil this out for, is 2 new versions of TPI incoming. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I think TPI, you can do a lot of different things with this commander. So we'll be showing you exactly how to do that. So yeah, thank you all for being here. It was a great chat. Thanks for your engagement and for all your good questions. Looking forward to doing more competitive Magic. For those of you interested, we have another tournament coming up in April. Let me post this here. It is for OMGMTG, Chris, whose birthday is today. So make sure to go and wish Chris a happy birthday for the day. He is hosting the Common Cause 3, the 3rd installation of the Common Cause cEDH tournament. This one has a really hefty prize pool. We've got $200 for first place. The charity that this all goes to is to Extra Life. And Extra Life does, let me see if I can dig this up here. Extra Life, I think, does charity. Extra Life is, oh yeah, they work with children's hospitals. And so that they're a great organization to support for that. And that one is coming up on, I think it's April 27th April 27th, starting at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So of course, for those of you on the West Coast, this will be a 9 o'clock tournament. It'll be 90-minute rounds. I think probably 4 or 5 rounds to go. And entry is probably, I want to say it's probably like 10 to 15 bucks. But yeah, this is going to be a great experience. It's supported by EB Shine, Trying Casually Games, myself, and of course led by our main man, Chris, from One More Games MTG. So make sure to go sign up for that. You can find links to that here in the server for the for OMG MTG. I'm going to link the description below here. If you're not part of the server, you should go join it. There's a link to the Discord, and he's got details in there on the event. But if you're not part of the Common Connoisseurs Discord, you should join it, because that's also where we're going to be reposting updates on that tournament and getting ready for that. So, boy, that was a mouthful. We're going to wrap things up here. So, Connoisseurs of Fine Common Cardboard, thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure chatting with you and sharing about the Sanctuary Open 4 tournament. Thank you to Bobby, Be Fine, and to Liam, who judged the tournament, and for Bobby, who organized it, and for ponying up the big prize support. Very much appreciate that. Super stoked to get all the prizes coming in the mail, and proud to be repping our mid-range game strong. So with that, wherever you are in the multiverse, catch you on the flip side, and we'll see you on the battlefield. Peace out.